We're just waiting to see if the TV is on. We never know.
Rather have it not on.
Okay, we're going to open the May 9th meeting of the Nantucket Planning Board.
Make a motion to approve the agenda.
Nat's made a motion to approve the agenda. We have a new member, by the way. We'd like to welcome John Trudell, who ran hard the last meeting in the election against himself. So, welcome aboard. Present, we have Diane Coombs, Carl Borchard, John Trudell, Joe Marklinger, myself, Linda Williams, Vice Chair, and Nat Lowell. The regular board members are John, Joe, myself, and Nat.
Barry.
And Barry is coming, but he had to work. I think he had to work for another 10 or 15 minutes. We have an agenda. Nat made a motion to approve the agenda. Joe, did you second?
I seconded it, yes, I did.
Catherine, Joe seconded. The only ones we're approving, unlike the original agenda, was just April 14th, 2016. Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay. We have a bunch of A&Rs. Joe, are you
You want to do the...
I'm fine on all those. I'm not involved.
are you recused from any of these?
No, I'm not.
Great. Are there any questions? Is there anything here, Leslie, that we shouldn't be approving? Okay.
Okay.
Somebody want to make that motion?
Yep. I'll make a motion to approve 7959.
Yep.
Skiff 5 and 7 Skiff Lane, 7561 Town of Nantucket, Mequash Avenue and Laurel Street, 7962 3 and 5 South Mill, 7963 Nantucket Cottage Hospital,
57 Prospect.
7964 Town of Nantucket, L Streets Lot A and C, 7965 Graham Kilvert, 34 Prospect, 7966 Chris Gallant and Annette Tremblay, 15A Gray Avenue, 7967 Michael and Don Holgate, 15 Exeter Street, 7968 Geraldine Roos, Trustee, 56R Matacasham Valley Road, 7969 Annie K. Interesting. 18A, 18B Atlantic Ave, 7970 Sunset Realty Trust, and at Point Road, that's out in Fisher's Landing, I believe. 7971 Richmond Great Point Development.
It's withdrawn.
This is withdrawn.
It's withdrawn.
So just 7970.
Okay.
And that's my motion.
Nat's made a motion on the A&Rs as detailed by Nat in his motion. Is there a second?
Second it, yep.
Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay, thank you very much.
Okay.
We have secondary dwellings. Barry has arrived, so we're on secondary dwelling. Thanks.
Thanks. So, board members, you have 5 secondary dwellings before you at this point. Is there a wish to isolate anything out from the group?
I'm going to be voting against the first 3.
Okay. But is there a wish to isolate anything out for discussion?
No.
There you go. All
I'll
right.
make a motion to approve 3 Beacon Lane, 13 Folger Avenue, 14 Eat Fire Spring, John Esposito, 250 Poplas Road, and 3 School Street, per staff recommendations.
Do I hear a second?
Second.
Discussion?
Well, I'm only voting against the first 3. 3 Beacon, 13 Folger, and 14 Eat Fire Springs.
All right.
Do you want me
So,
to take them one at a time?
yeah, I think
Yep.
let's.
I'll withdraw my motion and redo the motion.
Yeah.
I'll make a motion to approve 3 Beacon Lane.
Do I hear, motion's made and seconded, discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye. And that's per
staff recommendation.
staff recommendation. 13
And-
Folger Avenue,
And
same
no,
vote.
I'm no on Beacon.
Mr.
So it's 4-1.
Mark and Joe opposed, correct.
13 Folger Avenue.
Second to
I'll
that?
second that.
Thank you. Discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed,
I'm opposed.
duly noted.
4-1.
Yep. Next one is,
14 Eat Fire Spring, John Esposito.
and do I hear a second?
Second.
Motion's made and seconded for discussion. Hearing none, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed,
Nay.
Four to one.
noted, 4-1.
250 Pulpus Road.
Okay.
Second.
Discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, ayes have unanimously. And,
And 3 School Street, Mary Hurd.
okay, do I hear a second to that one?
Second.
Motion's now made and seconded for discussion. Hearing none, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, ayes have unanimously. You have 2 tertiary dwellings before you at this point. Any discussion on these? Or wishing to isolate anything else?
I need to recuse from 50 Appleton Road.
All right, duly noted. All right, so
Yeah.
what's the pleasure of the board with 50 Appleton Road?
Yeah, I'll make a motion to approve 50 Appleton Road for
Do I hear a
staff
second?
recommendation.
I'll second.
Motion is made and seconded for discussion. Hearing none, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Those
And I
opposed,
recused.
duly noted.
And I'll make a motion to approve 16 Monahasset.
Okay. Do I hear a
Second.
second? Thank you. Motion's made and seconded for discussion. Hearing none, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, ayes have unanimously. Brings us to previous plans, which is number 3222 Camellia Lane subdivision. This is a Form J for Lot 1-A.
Motion to approve the release of Lot 1A,
All right.
Form J.
Do I hear a second to that? Motion's made and seconded for discussion. Hearing none, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, ayes have unanimously. Brings us to 7263, which is the Reed Pond Properties. They're requesting an extension.
So moved
Second.
to April 23rd, 2018.
Got it.
What?
Hope we're still here then.
Is that what we're doing?
Yep.
And it's only been since 2010.
10.
All right, so that motion is made and seconded. Is there discussion on the issue? Hearing none, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, ayes have unanimously. Next thing is 7264, which is the Bunting Lane subdivision. This is to endorse the plans and the legal documents. Pleasure of the board.
So moved. I know they're a little bit late, but Andrew, we're okay with this now?
Yeah, you're with it, with your motion, yes.
Okay.
Okay, that motion is now made. Do I hear a second to that?
Second.
Discussion on the issue? Hearing none, all those in favor, please say aye.
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 Those opposed, ayes have unanimously. That brings us to 4
Thank you.
Thank you, sir. That brings us to 4 Hall Lane, Juanita Gill.
I'm recused on this one.
Mr. Markinger is recused. You see the modification that's before you at this point. Is there any discussion on the issue?
One.
Yes, ma'am.
Is this something we can say that should the road be paved to that point, they are to put the apron on, or we are just eliminating the apron requirement entirely?
Just eliminating it entirely.
Yeah.
What's going to happen when it is paved?
The planning board has not traditionally imposed conditions for when the road's paved in the future. We make your approvals based on what the current conditions are.
Well,
Well, doesn't that fall
they're
under
going
the
to
DPW?
pave it at some point. Wouldn't that make more sense to say whenever it is paved, they put the apron in so it doesn't disintegrate? Everybody else put the apron in.
Well, it would make sense when they pave it to put the aprons in as part of the paving project, so.
As
used to do.
voluntarily, but we can't require them to do it whenever it's paved. Okay. I'll make a motion to approve Hull Lane.
Okay, do I hear a second to that?
Second.
Discussion on the issue. Hearing none. All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Those opposed, let the record reflect that's 4-0 with Mr. Markinger abstaining. Okay. Brings us to public hearings. If you're here for 7716 Valero Road Subdivision, 7918 Richmond Ray Properties Development, for 16-15, those are all, which is Brotherhood of Thieves, those are all continued to June 13th. That brings us to 7771, which is the White Elephant LLC on 50 Eastern Street. Mr. Bodett, good evening, sir.
Good evening. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just walked in, just in time for this.
Perfect time.
Rick Bodett for the applicant. You may remember, I don't think I've been here since October. And in fact, this, you may remember, is a freeze plan to freeze the zoning at RC from, I believe it was changed to CN, and this goes way back to the 2014 town meeting. This is the definitive plan. We've, just to refresh your recollection, we've been before you a couple of times. Attorney Alger and her clients have raised some concerns relative to traffic. This was initially a 10-lot subdivision, and I think we had worked out most of the kinks with you, but Attorney Alger's clients would like to see a smaller number of lots. And we've gone back and forth on this, and when we were here last time, the discussion centered around whether we would restrict this subdivision to 3 lots without further relief from the planning board. I didn't have the authority at that time to make such a restriction, but I have it now. And so that's what's before you. It's these 3 lots. It is a freeze plan. And again, we've discussed in the past that the likelihood of this ever becoming even a 3-lot actual used plan or a 10-lot plan is very unlikely. However, nonetheless, if we ever need to come back, we do want that condition to say without further relief from the planning board, so that if we do want to do a full traffic study and show you all the 10 lots, we'd have to do that at that time.
Okay, board members, do you have any questions for Mr. Bodett or any discussion?
No, that was my only concern.
Okay, go ahead, yeah.
So let me get this straight. What you're protecting then is 3 lots, not the original 10.
What we're protecting is the zoning in place.
The zoning in place.
Yes.
For so many years.
And this is currently, would be, with your approval, a 3-lot definitive subdivision plan. If we ever wanted to make it 10 lots within the freeze period, we would have to come back and we would need your permission. I think we'd have to go through a much more rigorous process.
Now, I never quite understood the triangle at the head of the hammerhead that extends. It looks like it extends into that section where you come off the Chapter 91 and come around to the town pier. Is that what that little triangle is?
Yeah, I know that the whole bottom part is the Chapter 91 licensed area. I'm not sure. I'd have to check with the engineer on that. I'm not sure why that triangle pops out like that.
Because it looks a little odd. That's where it sort of turns to sand and it comes around to the other side of the town, the land.
Yeah, I mean, maybe that's their description of the property.
Okay. Anyone else? Anything to stop at this point? Ladies and gentlemen, this is a public hearing. If anyone would like to comment on this. Ms. Alger? Hi.
Hi. Sarah Alger for Brant Point Association. I just want to say that with that restriction to 3 lots, our objections go away. We understand that the freeze applies to the land and not the lots, but knowing that they'd have to come back and go through the process of having a more rigorous review if they ever wanted to do more than 3 lots, we're satisfied. We appreciate the applicants willing to do that.
Great. Anyone else wishing to comment on this? Seeing no one else?
I'll make a motion to close the public hearing.
Do I hear a second?
Second.
Motion's made and seconded for discussion. Hearing none, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed?
Motion to approve.
Okay.
Second.
Discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Ayes have unanimously. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you very much.
Great.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, sir.
just
Sir.
for the record should probably be clear on that. John, I think, were you here during all those other meetings? You were, as an alternate?
Yes.
Okay. Okay, great.
All right, thank you.
Yep.
Good point. Next thing before us is 7917, which is 4 North Mill Court, LLC. For the applicant, Mr. Cohen, good evening.
Mr. Chairman. Try to keep this simple. I know that there are a number of neighbors here who do not want the relief that's being requested. I know the board, some of the members of the board have expressed concern about it, and I'd like to really just keep it simple. What my client is suggesting is that the restriction that was put in place is either very unusual for a residential subdivision and is essentially protecting trees from trees and creating an undue burden on this lot, or that it's not necessarily the only or best way to achieve the goal. And what my client would like to be able to do is to have one of 3 or 4 things within the additional 5-foot buffer zone that has been added to the zoning setback. If the board is open to that, then fine, and if the board is not open to that, then that's fine. I'd like to keep it as short and sweet as possible. The portions of this project are a house, a cottage, a pool with a fence, and then the pool equipment. If the board is open to any of those 4 things being within that 5-foot buffer, it would be very helpful, and we would be willing to, increase the screening to make sure that the impact on the residents, on the park next door is minimized. The house is at the new house is at the northernmost point of the lot, which is sort of in the middle of the right-hand blue rectangle behind you. And, if that house could slide back with 5 feet, it would really help actually with the siting of the driveway. Right now, the driveway doesn't really have room for a turning radius, so we're ending up with these pull-in spaces. So my client would like to be able to, if you go back. So yeah, so that's the lot. But I think if you go back actually 1 or 2 slides where there was the one that had the house on it. That. Okay. So if we could pull, if you could slide it up a little. The house here is on the bottom, although that's the northern side. The bottom of this slide is the northern side. If we could slide that house back a little bit, that would be beneficial to the layout. If we could have the pool fence and some of the patio within there, that would be beneficial. If we could hide the pool equipment in there, that would be beneficial. Or if we could have a little piece of the cottage in there, that would be beneficial. My client is willing to do a lot of screening. There's a lot of natural screening there now. And, frankly, as much as screening as we do, the difference is going to be negligible at some elevations and significant at others. And what I mean by that is in some places you won't see it at all, and in some places you're going to see it no matter what. If you're standing up at the top of the sledding hill, you're going to see this whole neighborhood because your elevation is so high. And then also if you're standing on this walking path that runs along the bottom of this development, you're going to see these houses no matter what because they're going to tower over the vegetation. The vegetation isn't 30 feet tall. So I'm really not quite sure what's being served, but my client would install very dense vegetation to serve whatever purpose the board is sees fit.
Great, thank you. Board members?
I've been the fly in your ointment since you brought this in.
Yes.
Because when we approved this subdivision, they knew right from the beginning that there was a 10-foot buffer. Because when you look at the lack of density of the trees, or whatever you want to call it, some cedars over there, on the town property, it's minimal. There's big holes. They're sporadic. And I know we made an attempt, you made an attempt to go to the town to see if you could plant the buffer on their side, and they can't legally do that. So whatever screening has to take place on your own client's property. Now, I had originally asked for that 10-foot buffer, both on that side and the other side towards the cemetery. We didn't get it on that side. We got it on this side towards where the majority of the people, living people, are hanging out in Mill Hill Park. They knew it was there when they bought it. The developers agreed to it when they did the subdivision. I'm not saying it's your fault, but I don't like bait and switch. It's been well established since the time that they did the subdivision, before you got involved with us, that it was a 10-foot buffer. and another board when I saw this. I was concerned that they are paving over with structure almost the entire lot, probably 80% of this lot, between hardscaping, pool, oversized cottage, and the oversized house. They had an opportunity at that time, because it was a vacant lot, to design something that didn't go into the 10-foot buffer. They chose to max out this property, max into that buffer. I know up to only 5 feet because it's a 5-foot setback legally for zoning. And they could have designed something substantially smaller, probably even smaller by 100 square feet per structure, and it would have worked. Instead, they want what they want. They paid a lot of money for the lot, and they want to cram 20 pounds of potato into a 10-pound sack. I'm not moving from the 10-foot. I fought for it the first time, and I'm not moving off the 10 feet, and I've been very clear about that from the beginning. I don't care if it's irregular. There is no other lot next to the Mill Hill Park that's being developed until this time. So it's not really particular to any other subdivision on Nantucket, which is next to another subdivision, next to another subdivision. The closest subdivision to this is cemetery plots. So let's be real with this. And as far as the cars backing out, almost every lot up there, the cars are backing out. So this isn't particular to this lot. Almost every one of them has pretty much maxed out, and the lots are very irregular shape, some of them. So they're all parking side by side and all backing out into their private way that doesn't go through to anything. So I don't care about their backing out and the problem of backing out. There's no turnaround on any one of these lots, and they can't because they're not big enough. So I'm having a lot of problems with this. The structure, I think, is what is concerning me the most. They don't have to build a structure that size. Not my problem. And it's not one story. It's got a little bit of a story and a half element to it. I don't think that should be anywhere near the 10 foot. I think it should be 10 feet, period, not 5. If some of the pool looks like it's still at the 10-foot level. If some of the hardscaping, provided they get it approved at another board, if some of that hardscaping goes up to 5 feet, that's probably not so bad. You're going to have to screen the heck out of it for the other board's purposes. You're going to have to put a fence and all this other crap in there. And it's not a flat lot, so I don't know how all this is going to affect it because it's very high up on the street level, and then it goes straight downhill. So I don't know how that pool's getting in there unless the pool's getting elevated, which I think is a missing equation here, because if that pool deck is elevated 4 feet, 5 feet, where it sinks down in there, in the gully that's in the middle, then I don't think the pool surround should be in the 10-foot setback, because then you're going to be looking at a solid 4, 5, 6-foot wall. So I don't know what's happening there.
I'm sure the HTC will not let the pool be 4 feet up in the air.
Well, that's what I'm saying. You're showing a flat lot. I don't know what's happening. I don't know what the impact's going to be ending up being. But that's why I asked for the 10-foot, so they could build within their means and put something a little bit smaller on there and fit within that 10-foot. They still get the 5 on the other side. So that's just me, and I'm not budging.
Okay. I appreciate that, Linda. I'm just really basically looking for whether there's anything that you would find acceptable. So it sounded like you might be open to hardscaping but not structures, and I don't know if the rest of the board is open to that, maybe mechanical instead of structures. But
mechanical's got to be, if you're going to talk about mechanical, you're talking about freestanding mechanical. That's not going to happen anyway. So the pool equipment's going over here somewhere. So I don't want to see pool equipment stuck at 5 feet with very little screening either, because I just was at a house today with a privet around their pool equipment, and it was staggering what it looks like. So I can't go there either. The only thing I could see myself doing is maybe this piece of the pool surround, which is showing.
Okay.
But that's it.
Well, and I appreciate that. That's just what I'm looking for, is whatever the board is open to, we'd appreciate and be willing to, accommodate your conditions.
Thank you. Andrew, just a quick question for you at this point. What was the scoop with the DPW? Was it a legal issue, or was it just they weren't?
It's a choice issue. And
it's a choice issue. Okay. I just want to be clear as to what was going on with that. Was there anyone else on the board who want to comment on this? Yeah, go ahead, Di.
I was commenting on the same as Linda. This is a town park that is used extensively, both winter and summer. And the noise of the pool going, air conditioning, and all the rest of the stuff is a insult to the land. And you plant a buffer zone, it's not going to take place and start growing for some length of time. Our few parks that we have, particularly the ones in town, should be respected. And as Linda stated, the confines of this lot were well known before it was bought. And to buy it and then push to the edge, I think should be regarded. The neighbors who live up and down and away from the park support the continuation of the 10-foot buffer. And I think we really have to think seriously about protecting what few open parks that are walkable through and sledding and just a very nice walk through it should be respected and not have a house sitting up over your shoulder. It's enough on the other side with the cemetery. There are some things that just shouldn't be disturbed.
Anyone else on the board wishing to comment on this? Andrew, Leslie, do you have anything?
No.
Yeah, go ahead.
My take on this is it never should have gotten the 10-foot from the beginning. I think it's insanity how this happened. I didn't even really remember how it happened, to be totally honest. It was just this one lot, and it kind of, there was other things going on. We were talking about how many square feet each one was going to be, waiving, I mean, there was a lot of other discussion.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it was a last minute.
Yeah.
We should do this too. It wasn't a
It's
staff
100
recommendation
feet
or anything like
it's
that.
100 feet from the park, from the where they go sledding. Okay, I'm in the minority. That's fine. How do we proceed with what we can allow in there? Like no foundation, nothing, in the ground, per se, that can't be removed. That's what I'm saying. You don't have to have, I mean, I can get into this whole pool stuff. I'm not going to get into it. That doesn't matter. There's ways to do different things with that stuff, but I'm not going to get into that at this meeting. But what else do you want to put in that 5 feet, Steve, besides a little bit of hardscaping?
Well, I think that.
I mean, I don't know.
Yeah,
how do we make a list?
If it was not a building, then it would just be hardscaping essentially at grade,
Yeah.
or fencing hidden by vegetation,
Yeah,
or mechanical. But I think that's been commented on too.
No mechanical. Okay,
Yeah.
the 5 feet. That's a lot. That zoning district. Nothing is in that, except screening. Correct.
Right.
Okay. So I mean, we have to. Do we have to have a like we do with a special permit, and do with conditions of what can be and can't be? This is a little bit different than typical 3-2 subdivision approval.
Well,
This isn't a special permit.
there's no specifics about what is included in this planting area at all.
But I know that.
So there's
That's why
none.
I'm asking.
So,
Well, shouldn't we once there's the discussion finishes, we should get specifics from the applicant
Yeah.
before we vote on it?
Right. That's what I'm asking.
Like a sketch or
Can't have
a
something
list or
change.
something like that.
Well,
Can't have
Correct.
something change, Steve.
Correct.
Yeah.
You know what I'm
If the
saying?
board is open to something, I could bring that in. I didn't want to, push because of the resistance. I wanted to see
Yeah.
whether there was any possibility.
What's the thing on this? I'm looking at it. What's the deadline on this one? I don't see it. Andrew, Steve, what's the continued date?
The action deadline is
Action
the
deadline.
25th, May 25th. But we could extend it.
to the next meeting? Just for that purpose that Joe's
Yeah.
talking, that's what I'm asking. I just don't want to.
Yeah. So
Where I'm
Make
at
sure
is
everybody knows what we're
in
saying.
agreement with Linda.
Can't happen.
So
If there are two in agreement
Yeah.
with me, then there's no point in continuing.
No,
So
I'm talking about
is the board open to at grade?
this isn't a special permit.
3-2.
right.
It's just an unusual This is an unusual.
Well, you know what, all right, I'm going to slow this conversation down. Let's not be counting votes before they hatch here. I'm a little concerned with the board starting to do that without even having clear public testimony, because that, I'm sorry, just personally, as
I
the chair,
understand, Barry.
that just doesn't feel right.
I understand. The reason
Yeah.
I brought it up is because
Yeah.
normally in a special permit we have conditions,
Yep.
and we write them down, and staff's got them written down in the notes. This is different than that, but it's kind of similar in the sense of what can and can't go in that
Well,
5 feet.
If-
That's all I'm saying.
If the board is open to, essentially at-grade hardscaping and fencing, that's an easy condition, and it would actually be a waiver to the existing condition, and we could submit a plan, but only, if the board's open to it.
Mr. Cohen, I think for clarification from this board, before we go too much further, you had a punch list no more than 10 minutes ago of what
Yeah.
you desired that you wanted to do,
Right.
correct?
Yeah,
All right.
that-
Do me a favor, one more time for the edification of this board.
yeah.
Will you please give them that list so that they're all cognizant and aware of what you are requesting to fulfill Mr. Lowell's thought of what is it that you'd like to see? Can
Sure.
you please do that for all of us?
Sure. The original request was to be able to put portions, the rear portions of the house and cottage, the hardscaping, the pool fence, and mechanical, which would essentially be pool and or AC. And if the board would like to whittle down that list, so be it.
So board members, there you go. Those are the 4 requests that we have from the applicant at this point about thoughts of what they'd like to see take place. Okay? So if there's something that this board wants to discuss with the applicant on that, I think this is the appropriate time to which to do it, unless you want to hear a little bit more public testimony. So I'm just saying to you, and I hope that helps Nat a little bit, because that I don't think we need to continue into another meeting. You pretty much have the definitives of what they're looking for. Okay? Does that help? A little bit?
I
Okay.
just don't want to, the reason I asked him about continuing to June, if they had to, is because I want to make sure that everyone that's here for this knows what can and can't happen in this project.
So,
It's very seldom do you get this much attention to something this small. So everybody's going to be watching this. So we
Yeah.
want to make sure we don't miss anything.
I want more than,
That's what
I want more than a conversation. I want a written list or a plan. After we have our discussion and say, we will agree with this.
Mr. Chairman,
Yeah,
could I make
please.
one
Yeah.
suggestion? I think you probably could take a vote fairly quickly about the structure portion
Yeah.
and just
Yeah.
take that off. So no portion of the house and no portion of the cottage. Because it should be in there.
No mechanical.
Well,
All right, well,
if again,
let's-
of the,
Okay, so rear portions of the house, pool fence, mechanical, and what was the 4th one, Steve? I'm so sorry.
Hardscape.
Hardscaping.
Hardscape. All right,
So then
so
deck or patio.
In the house.
Basically
Ground level.
at grade
At grade.
hardscaping.
all right, so the hardscape is what? Okay. So are we correct with those 4 things?
Right.
All right. So just give me a second, please.
And the fence, I can't remember if you just said the fence or not.
Fence is part of the hardscape.
Okay.
I'm going to do the 4 things with him because that's
Yeah.
his request. So because this is kind of going back and forth between the board members, thank you, Andrew. I think you hit the nail on the head. Because we're just going to take each one of these separately by the board, see what your thoughts are, flush it out. I am going to take a moment of privilege at the moment. I guess just one thing, which is killing me personally, is that Mill Hill and that park really do need a fair amount of work, which I think will be inherent upon the town one fine day to do it. And I wish I'd been part of the conversation with the DPW because I'm kind of surprised that all just slipped right off and was of no interest. So, but that's not for me to decide, but I just want to register that comment out into the public venue because ultimately that's going to come out of our tax dollars at one point, and here was an opportunity maybe to do some work. All right, so board members, I'm just going to ask you on each one, and I'm just going to go through the 5 of you sitting here. All right, so I'll do that, but we are going to come back to this because we're going to
Okay.
go through each one of these four things with the board. Maybe the public will sway your decision a little bit. I'm not walking away with it. John, just you sat through all of these, right? Perfect. That's all I need to know. So thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for taking a few minutes with us. Public hearing's open at this point, and if you'd identify yourself for the record, please.
Stacy Donovan, Eagle Lane.
Thank you.
I use the park every day, sometimes a couple times a day, and I use it year-round. This is our central park. How this development happened is devastating to me, but the fact is it's there, and it's going to happen. But to renege and start saying maybe a 5-foot setback, I mean, literally the path that I use borders the fence in the border of this property. And I mean, we're talking within a few feet. So any sort of, like, if we did a 5-foot setback and allowed any sort of mechanical or just even greenery just within 5 feet, a tree can't grow within 5 feet. Think about most of your shrubs. If you take the actual radius of it, it's going to be more than 5 feet. Okay? So now you're talking, originally it's supposed to be a thick vegetation, privacy. None of that's going to happen at 5 feet. That's the reality, And when we start discussing like their priority list and their punch list, nowhere in there do I see the public's interest, only theirs, This is a public park, and it has been for over 100 years. When the development came to being and we said the 10-foot buffer, I said, thank God for that. And now we're starting to discuss pretty heavily and, not having a buffer. I don't want to have to be walking by somebody and looking at them, in the few minutes of the day that I have to just relax and walk the park with my dog. I will, but I can't believe that they would want to be looking at people, I mean, it just seems like they want to build every inch of that property. And if any of you really go and look at the property, it's a sloped property. It would be very easy for any sort of disturbance to also disturb the walking path itself. It's the pathway goes right by this property, and already there was discussion to even, could we put the buffer zone and put vegetation on the park? But that's now blocking people from using the path that's been there forever. So again, it seems like the owners only have their interests in mind and not the parks, and they're trying to, we'll do this or we'll do that. But the fact is, they're only out for themselves, and I really want the public park to stay public and not feel like you're walking through someone's backyard. Definitely a drainage, I think, would be a problem, and also anything 5 feet or less, that's ridiculous to think that things can grow. This is what I do for a living. If you actually want privacy, you need the 10-foot buffer, particularly on this one lot, because it borders the park more than any other lot on all of these. That's the one where when you're walking this pathway, you're walking right along their border. All the other ones, there's already more of a buffer of the park there, but this one in particular, this is the only lot that you're the closest to the whole time. It's just, so I really encourage all of you to really go and walk the path there and see what we're talking about, because for one thing, already half of it has been cut right to the fence line. There is no buffer right now. They cut it straight down. I hope you guys have those pictures, because it gives you a better idea of what you'd be dealing with later if we start kind of saying, 5 feet's okay, because it's really not. And this again, thank you, Linda, and thank you, Diane, for talking about the fact that they always knew that this had the buffer. That was good foresight with everybody. So please keep the 10-foot buffer.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Scott?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the Planning Board. My name is Charles Stott, and I'm the co-president of the Nantucket Civic League, whose executive committee on April 4th voted to oppose the application for a waiver of condition number 12. The Civic League has a long history with this park. 4 community-minded citizens donated parcels of land to the Nantucket Improvement Association, the forerunner of the Nantucket Civic League, for the exclusive use of the inhabitants as a public park. In 1963, the Civic League deeded the park to the town of Nantucket, again with the provision that it be used exclusively as a public park. And it's well used, as many people know. There have been attempts to use this parkland for other purposes that have been thwarted, most recently at the 2015 annual town meeting when there was a warrant article to have a portion of the land used by the hospital. Happily, that was defeated. We strongly support condition number 12, which requires this 10-foot densely vegetated buffer. As was just mentioned, there's a walkway along the border of the subdivision, and we can't do much about the fact that the development was approved and there'll be houses there, but we can mitigate the impact on people who visit the park and enjoy the peace and the tranquility of it by retaining the 10-foot buffer that's required by paragraph 12. So we would urge the planning board to reject this waiver and retain that 10-foot buffer.
Great. Thank you, sir.
Hi, I'm Annie Mendelson. The plans show a retaining wall,
Could you identify your address, please, ma'am?
Crooked Lane.
Thank you.
The plans show a retaining wall along the northern boundary of the private property, and if land is cut out of the hillside and pushed to the south, it will create a flat area for pool and patio. However, the change in grade will cause erosion problems along the boundary with Mill Hill Park. A 10-foot setback with dense vegetation is necessary to absorb the runoff and spill-off from the inevitable erosion. The needed soil stabilization and plantings to provide a visual screen will not work if the buffer is reduced to 5 feet. Mill Hill Park is a unique part of Nantucket's heritage as the first established public park. Even then, the land was valued for its beauty and diversity of plants. Today, the park is widely used by schools, camps, families, and individuals, and physical exercise in a natural environment. As town roads and buildings continue to develop and expand, we realize just how precious protected environments like Mill Hill Park truly are. I encourage you to respect and protect Mill Hill Park and help minimize the impact of the development by upholding the 10-foot vegetative buffer requirement. Create a better park experience for all and preserve the park so future generations can enjoy this priceless part of our heritage. The buffer is important on this highly visible property, and I hope you will vote to deny the waiver request.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Staffelstein, good evening, sir.
Mr. Chair, members of the board, I'm Lee Saperstein. Co-President Stott has already mentioned the vote of the executive committee. I am a member of that executive committee, so I think you can register that I'm opposed to the waiver. I would just like to comment that I appreciate staff putting my memorandum in the packet, where I relate that as a professor of engineering, actually licensed in the 3 states in which I was employed. I used to teach about sight and sound shielding and the design requirements necessary to make them work. In essence, what I said in the 6 or 8 points of the memorandum is that if you cut into the boundary, you let sound escape and you provide entry points for vision. So much as I heard Council Cohn talk about, well, a little bit here and a little bit there, I think that they would defeat the purpose of the barrier. I appreciate your time. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Mr. Manchester, good evening,
Hi,
sir.
Jimmy Manchester, retired Park and Rec Director of Nantucket. My experience of dealing with parks on the island, that we've been required to have buffer zones. It works twofold. It works for the consumer that owns the property, and it works for the town public concern. And that's basically what I want to say. It's a positive for both sides. Thank you.
Great. Howdy.
Hello, Andrew McKenna Foster, Vestal Street. I'm here on behalf of myself, not Mariah Mitchell Association, who I work for. But I'm an ecologist. I study animals, natural history, and I've used this park many times personally and also professionally. A lot of camps on the island use it. A lot of people use it for recreation. But it's an amazing in-town resource to see animals and see the native vegetation. And I would just like to emphasize that buffers are extremely important ecologically as connectors between habitat. They allow birds to move between safe areas without getting picked off by predators. They're home to insects that provide food for birds. And I just think that anything reducing vegetation in this park will hurt the species that live there. Thank you.
Thank you. Howdy.
David Callahan, 2 Cato Lane, perhaps one of the closest abutters to this. And we love the path that goes by this. It's been there for a long time. I'm definitely opposed to this. I think it'll open it up to the developments there. And you voted against. You put this restriction on not that long ago. And I can't believe that the owner or the buyer of the lot knew it was there, and he's redesigned his house and encroached upon it and cut it down. So what is your recourse for somebody that breaks this?
They're here. I'm not sure they've necessarily broken it at this point.
The restriction wasn't that the existing vegetation had to stay. It has to be replanted to meet that standard.
The same standard that was there.
To meet the words, which is the densely planted. Correct.
Yep. All right.
Yep.
Thank you.
Does that help? Okay. Mr. Collier.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Cormac Collier, Nantucket Land Council. Without sounding repetitive, I just would like to support what everybody has already said, and that the Land Council is in opposition to the request. I participated in the original subdivision hearing when the 10-foot buffer was discussed without a problem. It was readily accepted, and I hope you stay true to that. Thank you.
Great. Thank you. Anyone else wishing to comment on this?
Hi, Lynn Tucker. I'm a neighbor abutting Mill Hill Park, and I've been very vocal and trying to protect it from many things. But this development has been a devastation for so many people that have enjoyed the park, and even older people who have stories, because I used to walk through it every day for the last 32 years. They tell their stories of when they're little kids, and they walked and ran in the hills, and I, of course, knew Mrs. Egan. It's a done deal, but whatever you can do to help the community and the rest of the island that enjoys the park so much would be greatly appreciated. That 10-foot buffer is a must. And I've walked up there and talked to one of the owners at one time, and he said that there would be a 10-foot buffer. He told me we will be doing vegetation, and I would just like to have everyone keep their word as what was understood, because it's been a huge impact on the park. And speaking of the park, I have spoke with a couple different people and asking if the hill could have some work done on it, and haven't heard back from anyone. The park itself needs some attention, and the money sure seems to come for all these other projects, but it would be nice to honor the park, and I would appreciate if you take that into consideration, even though it's my backyard.
And mind you, we did, and the DPW said no, so maybe...
That's what I was going to say. Thank you for bringing that up, because I just read it, and I was going to talk to dear Jimmy about it, because Jimmy was always good at keeping up the park and the hill, and now it's been getting kind of dangerous with that erosion going on. That wouldn't take a whole lot to fix that up, and the kids could continue rolling down the hill.
Just so you know,
like they used to.
Just so you know, to redirect you, it would be the director of DPW that you want to talk to.
Yes, I understand that.
Good.
Okay. Oh, what's her name again? Okay.
Yeah, you can talk to staff or us out.
Okay, thank you for bringing that up.
You're welcome. Ms. Alger.
Sarah Alger, I understand you're continuing this till next month, so I have a procedural question that it affects the last one too. It's just a question. I don't know if Mr. Trudell can vote on this or not, because he was an alternate in the fall, and alternates can only vote on special permit matters, and this is a subdivision matter. So I'm not,
you're right.
I'm just not, I don't know the answer to the question, and it was the same on the matter right before this. And I thought if you were continuing, you might check with council and see what the answer is. But
Right.
I'm just not sure that just being here as an alternate qualifies him now as a full member to vote on a subdivision matter, maybe on a special permit,
Right.
but not on a subdivision. But I don't actually know the answer.
Well, right. I don't think it was, the vote on the white elephant was, there were at least 3 of you that voted on it, correct?
Mm-hmm.
It's not a subdivision issue.
Correct.
It's
It should be fine on the white elephant, but
Right.
this one I think is different.
Right.
Thank you for raising
Yeah,
that.
I'm not trying to create any
No.
issue.
I think you know me well enough by now, too, so I appreciate when you do raise those concerns. Thank you. It'll be 4 of us, yes. That's correct. No. It's simple majority to carry this.
Correct.
Yeah. Is there anyone else in the audience wishing to comment on this? All right. So, board members, I just think in deference to... Yeah, I don't, that's... Sarah, was there anything else in terms of continuing this that was problematic? No. Fine, I just want to make sure, because I'm not necessarily getting a sense from my board members that we are going to continue this. I'm feeling like...
that would give you an opportunity to check.
To resolve that. Thank you. But I think you know what, I'm still going to take that to heart, because there'll be a few other issues that'll come before us in the next few months. So thank you. It's a great thought to bring up.
Barry, excuse me.
Yes, ma'am.
Could I just thought of one other thing
Yep.
that I wanted to ask about was the noise that the ACs will cause as well. The park is a valley. Trust me, I wake up to the noise every morning and my house shaking from the sound coming through the valley. So the air conditioners and any kind of pool noise is going to be a constant impact for people who enjoy walking through the park.
Okay, thank you.
So, thanks.
Thank you. Go ahead.
Still not changing my mind. If you read number 12, it says that a 10-foot wide, densely vegetated buffer, including a mixture of coniferous and deciduous plant material, shall be established and permanently maintained. If we allow hardscaping, I don't think any mechanical should be anywhere near the 10-foot line. If we drop that down, that's a whole area within the 10 feet that you can't plant. It's hardscape. I mean, it's hard pack. You can't plant. So I'm backtracking slightly, Steve. I'm sorry. To nothing in the 10-foot except for densely vegetated buffer, including a mixture of so forth and so on. And it has to be replaced within 1 year of its removal. And since they've clear-cut almost the entire lot from property line to property line, they've got quite a feet ahead of them. So I don't need to continue it. You know how I'm going to vote. I appreciate the presentations from both sides.
So, let me do this, because that did come up with Mr. Lowell. I think, Linda, you've said that you don't want it.
Mr. Chair,
Yes, sir.
microphone a little bit closer.
Sorry. I apologize. Thank you for doing that. I'm usually pretty boisterous at times, but thank you. I'll do that for you. So, there were 4 points that Mr. Cohen asked us just to look at this point. Linda, I think you've said that on all 4 points. No. Mr. Lowell? All right, so there's nothing you want to discuss on either, on any, okay. Mr. Markinger?
Pretty much, the only thing I would consider is the fence, the pool fence, only because you can hardly, you can't see them when you.
Can we let him finish first, please?
I don't know.
Thank you.
I don't know if it's allowed or not, but that's the one thing, you really can't see those black,
So
Yeah.
I would say that there's no prohibition actually on structures or anything in here. It says you have to have the vegetation, but it doesn't actually prohibit anything. So I don't know that adding a pool fence to that vegetative buffer would actually be prohibited. But really, the staff that would do the inspection should answer that, because they're the one that has to sign off on it.
but other than that, I want to maintain the 10.
Okay.
If they're going to have a pool fence and they're not using a board fence, a standard pool fence is a 4-foot board fence or a cap picket. If they're going to do the wire and vegetation, it's usually required that those black wire vinyl fences with a wood post be in vegetation.
Yeah.
So it would be in the vegetation in that 10 feet. I don't have a problem with the fence being there because it's going to have to be vegetated per HDC approval anyway. And Diane's going to make sure that happens. So I don't mind the pool fence being in there because it has to be so many feet away from the pool legally.
Right. So if the board is not willing to grant any waivers except for the fence, I actually don't think we need the waiver for the fence. And I would defer to staff that would be doing the inspection to see if they agree with that interpretation.
Andrew, Leslie?
Well, I think in order to remove any confusion, we need you all to make that determination, and then we're not second-guessing you. So
There you go.
I think that from what I heard, it appears that is okay, but I need you all to make a vote on that.
Mr. Wall?
Fine with the fence, nothing else. I think it's well
Linda?
vegetation, obviously.
I'm fine with the fence.
It's going to help with the noise.
That's the only thing I'm focusing this discussion on right now, is just that one issue.
Does it
So
have
you're
to be
fine.
in vegetation?
Okay.
Yeah, I'm fine.
Okay, great.
Okay.
So there you go, Mr.
Okay, so is that a vote of 4-0 to amend the restriction to allow?
Whoa.
No, I'm
but that was a
just-
poll.
I'm just
Okay.
getting, I'm just going through your.
Oh, you're going to close the public hearing anyway.
I haven't closed the public hearing
That's right.
because I need the public to hear what we're
Okay.
doing before I do that. And here's the thing, since you had that list of 4 things,
Yeah.
you've got one thing the board's
So
going to.
let's see if we can wrap this up, and I will revise my request to amend the condition to allow for a fence within the buffer as a clarification.
Okay.
In the
I think-
vegetation.
I think-
In the vegetation.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think I think the board is in agreement with that.
I would amend my request to that.
Thank you. And I think staff now has their clarity for dealing with that. Good. Hi.
I'd like to have some clarification of what kind of fence, because that wasn't in your vote. So is it a wire fence in vegetation?
That would be HDC. They typically
Well,
require.
couldn't it be done here as well?
No, that's whatever they think is appropriate. It could be a solid board, which would deaden some of the sound and some of the visual impact. It could be cap picket, which is a little bit more open, 1.5 inches in between. It could be the
Could be
black
a wire
wire
fence,
in vegetation, which is 90% of what we see now, as opposed to
You answered my question.
board.
Good. Good. Okay. Is there anyone else in the public wishing to comment on this? All right.
I'll make a motion to close the public hearing.
Second.
Motion's now made second to close the public hearing. Any discussion on the issue? Hearing none. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, ayes have unanimously.
I'll make a motion to amend condition 12 only so far as it allows the pool fence to be in the densely vegetated 10-foot area.
Second.
And they also, just so you know, they also have to heavily vegetate the one that where the walking trail runs along the south side also. That's the 5 foot. But they have to densely vegetate the south and the east in the original condition, and that's staying.
I'll second that.
So the motion's made and seconded for discussion. Hearing none. All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Those opposed? Ayes have unanimously. Thank you, and thank you, everyone, for showing up. We appreciate it.
Thank you, Board, and I'd also like to thank the public for its heartful defense of the park, which is a very important resource here. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Steve.
Thank you for taking the park under consideration.
You're welcome. Thank you. Okay, next thing before us at this point is 17-16, which is Don and Michael Holgate, 15 Exeter Street. Is that you, Mr. Coleman?
That is me again, yes.
Great.
So, hopefully a relatively simple application for a Nantucket Housing Needs Covenant subdivision. The subdivision complies, except with the request for a waiver for the separate driveway. The lot has one driveway already. You can see it there. And up on the, I don't know if it's the northern side, but the top of that area of the lot is where the subdivision would be, and there would be a separate driveway. It's about 650 feet of frontage on that side. Here you can see the subdivision. Typically, the planning board likes to see 50 to 75 feet between driveways, and when there's a second driveway here, you'd have, I think, 400 feet or so. So I know there was a note in the staff report about that issue.
We've done a couple of these secondary lots there and a few other of these large lot areas, and we've allowed the second driveway, because especially here where they're bordered on streets on both sides, sometimes the other one will come in off one side, this one will come in off the existing driveway. I mean, this is not anything unusual out there between those ABC roads.
Yeah, as you know, most of the other lots in the area are 5 and 10,000 square, 10,000 square foot lots. This lot is over 3 acres.
Which is a rarity on Tom Nevers West.
Yeah, I think so. We approved all of it.
Anyone else on the board wishing to comment on this? Carl, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Through you, Mr. Chairman, to council. Has there been any discussion with the abutter on the Town Nevers roadside of moving the driveway further away from their lot line on the secondary lot?
I only learned about that today. We haven't had any discussion. The actual location of the driveway, I assume, is somewhat flexible. Sure.
Thank you.
And I think that could be done through the HTC process, where before we actually get approval for the driveway.
Yeah, go ahead.
Just a comment. If you look at the lot that you're talking about, they've got the whole thing cleared and cars and trucks and boats all over it. When you look at this lot, this is a small cottage with the driveway on the opposite side of the cottage from the people that are on Tom Nevers Road. So I don't have a problem with it just off the cuff.
Linda, that box up there is a septic system. There's no dwelling shown on that
That's
plan.
not the dwelling?
No, that's a septic system.
Okay.
But that lot, if you look at the GIS,
Look
is
at the
heavily
arrow.
wooded. Yeah, you can see it's heavily wooded, so anything that goes on there is going to be, very well screened.
Well, it looks like he's got a few things on their lot, too.
Anyone else on the board? Nope. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, this is a public hearing which is open at this point, so howdy.
Hi, I'm Elaine Russell. I'm the one with all the stuff in the yard that you're talking about up here. I'm at 2 Fairfield Street. Well, that's my husband, so I can't, anyway. But when we built, when you look at a lot of the other properties in that area, I know there are some 10,000 square foot lots, but a lot of them all have the driveway cuts coming down the middle of the piece of property. And I just have a concern because they want to, they've subdivided the lot, which is fine. I don't have an issue with that. But the fact that septic system is going to go right on the edge of about within 8 feet of our property line. So all of that, it may look wooded now because it's green, but believe me, it doesn't look like that wooded this time of the year, 6 months a year out there. And also the septic system, it's all going to be cleared because of the septic system, and then that driveway is going to go right adjacent to the septic system. So it's going to be wide open, and I kind of feel like, we built, that's kind of our backyard and our rental backyard, and our deck is out there, and a lot of that stuff that's back there behind the house is not there anymore. It's all been kind of, everything's been cleared out, pretty much.
Sure, go ahead.
Andrew, if we approve the second driveway cut, we're not approving that it's in that specific location, right? It can move a little bit towards the south?
Well, generally, we do approve the location, but we can, put something in that allows it to be shifted in the final. So we can do that.
Because you're correct when they do the septic system, but the septic system is going to be determined by your well,
Well,
their well, Dawn's well, and the wells on both sides of Exeter and Fairfield. So the septic system is determined largely by where everybody else's wells are, by the surveyor, the engineer that's doing, and Joe, you've done these by the engineer. So that may be the only spot for the septic.
Well, our well is actually on our well is on that same property line as that proposed septic system.
So it may move.
Let me provide some clarification. Due to the other wells in the area, that is likely the only location for the septic field. Yeah. But the driveway can go south. The driveway doesn't need to be there. We can work out something that moves it. The one thing that my client was thinking is that the pavement ends as you go south, and it might be nice to try to keep the driveway onto the paved part. You can see on the plan where it shows where the pavement ends, but really there's total flexibility on where the driveway goes. It's not something we're demanding goes in the north side or the south side.
Yeah, right up there. Yeah.
Well, there's the one.
Because I just also feel too, if you put this, once the septic and the driveway go way down at that end, then that piece of whoever, that lot, I assume that lot's going to be sold. So whoever buys that lot is obviously going to be putting their house closer to our property edge than, I know there's got to be at minimum 20-foot buffer there, 20-foot setback, but as opposed to the other side of the 2-acre lot.
But as Andrew said, we can, in this case, allow them to move the driveway without defining exactly where it is, and you guys can work it out, without tying it to that location. So in our decision, we will allow them to move the driveway further south without having to come back in here, and you guys have that conversation.
But that just still means that they can put it where it is now, if you approve it as that.
Yeah.
I guess my question.
Yeah, but I think they want to work with you guys.
And Andrew, Leslie, correct me if I'm wrong. We can write that into decision with a little bit of...
We can put it's not closer than so many feet. Did you have a suggestion on that?
Well, I had put 100 feet down because I didn't, it's hard to tell from I'm looking at it, it's a 200-foot lot.
Yep.
So I just kind of figured around closer to the middle.
I think 100 feet is too excessive. 75, Andrew?
Yeah, 70 sounds good. 70, 75.
Yeah. My client's preference would be to try to keep it on the paved side. I think 75 feet is sort of right where the pavement ends, but I can't scale that out. We might, from here. If you want to say the end of the pavement.
It looks like the pavement ends right where the lots are, right where the demarcation is.
Yeah, there's a little hitch there. Yeah.
So I don't think you have any prayer of dealing with the pavement side.
Okay.
How far does it go? It ends right at the lot line.
So I guess my question, does that seem reasonable if they're talking about aligning that to where the pavement ends?
No, Barry, it ends right at the lot.
No, I know, but she's looking for a number. The applicant's saying kind of where they're thinking they'd like it. I'm just trying to get a sense here.
The
That's all.
pavement's that whole lot, not this one.
But I guess if I don't really know where the pavement ends over there.
It ends right there at the septic, so it doesn't work with the pavement. That's actually closer to her.
Do you have a little laser pointer there so you can show where it is?
No, it's right there. It's marked.
Okay. Do you see where they're talking about?
Yes.
Oh, okay.
That's her lot, not
that is
Dawn's.
Oh.
You got to look at the other.
I'm not concerned. Right, no, that's why I'm asking.
So,
That's...
yeah, if you look at this, at the plan, I think that there's a line that's almost near the southern edge here that is, I think, where they demarcate the paved and unpaved sections. Maybe.
You're talking. Yeah, you're talking.
I
right
think
here.
that line, yeah, I think that's it.
Yeah, that's...
So, there's two sides to this coin. One is that the planning board doesn't generally take this concern into consideration. The planning board is thinking about public access, emergency vehicle access and traffic safety and those kind of things. But in this case, my client is entirely willing to accommodate the abutter and move the driveway to the south.
It's actually, is it the south or the west? Just farther back onto the land.
Yeah,
It's always kind of
whatever direction down is on that that plan.
Okay.
So, does that help?
Is that south? Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Anyone else in the audience wishing to comment on this? Howdy?
Hi, Don Myers. I'm an abutter directly across from 15 Exeter, that kind of big round driveway there. And, yeah.
Down south of it.
Yep, right there. And I just have two questions. I guess they just kind of answered one of them. But that drawing up in the top corner of the subdivided lot, that's planned septic, right? That's not a driveway?
Yes.
All that is planned septic?
Yes.
Okay, and right now there's a big clearing there, probably a perk test or something. And I would like to suggest that any clearing like that they're doing there be revegetated after the septic or the field goes in, if you're indeed going to move the driveway, which, I think that's a good idea. But that's number one. And I do have another concern with the other lot there, the original lot near the driveway. We were all in the neighborhood kind of confused about where this driveway cut was going to be, because there's a big clear cut right next to that driveway, right across from my driveway. And I don't know whether this is a temporary thing or whether that's another driveway cut they're putting in. But one, I'd like the answer to that question. But if it's just a temporary thing, I'd also like to suggest that be revegetated when they're done accessing that property.
Sure, I can answer.
Okay. Yes, please, Mr. Cohen.
So the cut on the southern lot is a construction cut for the access for a pool installation. And I assume that the applicant will be rescreening their own yard, although the requirement to do that as part of a Nantucket Housing Needs Covenant application would be a little unusual and unrelated to the matter before the board. But yes, that construction cut is temporary. And then the northern section where the septic field is, you can't really vegetate on top of a septic field, so that would be a poor idea if you want to maintain that field in a working condition. The grass is, but you don't want to plant trees on top of a septic field. I'm not an engineer, but I know that's a bad idea.
Okay, perhaps that's true. But the access to the pool, I guess that it is, I think it's, it would be great if that could be revegetated in keeping with the rest of the neighborhood, which is all, scrub oak at that point, at least for like 10 feet off the road.
Where are we talking about a pool?
Just on the other lot, on the market lot. Yeah, on that lot. Right. So again, not really relevant to the application, but it's a construction cut. It will be filled in. I don't think it needs to be a condition here, but I think we responded that it's a temporary situation.
Can I just say something, Mr. Chairman?
As long as it is, that'd be good.
This is 3 acres of land, folks. Come down off the ceiling, please. 3 acres of land. Okay?
That's Stuart Flagg. I live on 6 Exeter, and I actually paid to have that paved road put in, so I know where it ends. And right in front of my driveway. If you go back to the picture, you'll see.
Can we go back to the aerial? Where does it end?
Where that circle driveway, where my driveway comes in. See, I'm number 6. The driveway with the white van and the.
Down here, Stuart, or
No, next one up.
next one up?
Yep.
Thank you.
I would just like to see the driveway not be across from
Right.
anyone on that road,
Yeah, that makes sense.
and maybe help because I maintain that road,
Can we let him finish, please?
No, that's fine.
Thank you.
and maybe help pay towards keeping the road up. I know a lot of it's out of your control. This is just something I was asking about.
No, that's fine.
All right.
And maybe a vegetative buffer along the front of the lot. I know you can't. I'm just putting out my voice.
Thank you.
No, well, you'd be surprised. I know. That's it.
Okay, great, thank you.
As long as those are taken into consideration. Thank you.
Anyone else wishing to comment on this? Mr. Cohen, we kind of clear with stuff a little bit? I think you've heard a few
I think
things,
so.
and
I mean, I think this is a large benefit to the community to add an affordable, perpetually affordable dwelling unit of a very high quality that will be, it's essentially an acre lot that's being added to the affordable housing pool. My client is looking forward to seeing that go on the SHI list and help the town in that way as well.
Great.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, any last comments for the public? Not seeing anything, pleasure of the board at this point.
I'll make a motion to close the public hearing.
Do I hear a second?
Second.
Motion's now made and seconded for discussion. Hearing none. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, ayes have unanimously, and the pleasure of the board.
I'm not sure where I'm going, but I'll make a motion that
Can I-
the proposed driveway.
Can I suggest one thing before you?
Yeah.
do that? I was thinking that if the driveway lined up sort of centered of the two existing driveways across the street, which is about on that lot line across the street, there would never be any two driveways backing up to each other.
Yeah, but that's not uncommon.
That's a fair
all
bit,
throughout
that's a
there.
fair bit down.
Somewhere in there.
That would be in about 75 feet back from the property line.
Yeah.
That work? Part of my motion is to move the driveway 75 feet back from the northeasterly property line, down Exeter. Minimum. That's about what that is.
Is that going to work for you? Is that going to work for you guys? Because I'm a little concerned that has become.
No, I think that if it's a minimum of 75 feet and it's somewhere, as Joe has suggested, between those driveways, so it's not directly across,
Right.
that should work.
All right, that's the verbiage I really want us to kind of
But
adhere
it still
to.
has another 125 feet to go.
Yeah, but that gives a little bit more latitude.
All right, so it's not directly across the street from the two abutters
There you go.
I'll second that.
to the new lot.
So the motion is made and seconded. Is there any further discussion on the issue? If we're all clear at this point, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed,
We
ayes have
closed the public
unanimously.
hearing,
Thank
right?
you. Yes, we did.
Remember that.
We indeed did. All right, thank you. So that brings us to 7946, which is Stephen Waterhouse on 20 Sparks Ave. Mr. Reed, good evening, sir.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman. For the applicant, Arthur Reed, along with Teddy King, the surveyor on the project. This matter has been before the board previously as a sketch plan on a couple of occasions, which we received some input on. The plan was redesigned as a result and was submitted in March. The plan has received, it's a small three-lot subdivision off Sparks Avenue with a new roadway. We've received various comments from Ed Pesci, which most of which have been addressed, and some revisions have been made to the plan by Teddy King. He has been in touch with Ed about some other issues that Ed had raised, as to which we'd be asking for waivers. And after having reviewed the filing and the waiver list and a couple of points on there that I think we need to get together on and discuss with the client, I'm going to suggest that we continue this until the next meeting, and that during that period of time we'll pull together a waiver list, a revised waiver list that will definitively set forth what we would be looking to have waived. Again, this is a very small subdivision of the type where typically many of the requirements are not really applicable and that the board has generally waived them, but I want to make sure we're asking for the right things.
Mm-hmm. Board members, do you have anything for?
You're going to be okay on the setback on the dwelling on lot 3? It's kind of close to the lot line. Is
that intended to be moved?
Here, just come on up.
It was intended to be moved, but if the zoning changed to the CMI, it was going to a zero side setback, so I was leaving it, but I'm not sure.
Okay.
Yep. Go ahead.
Just, Teddy, you know you can't have openings, windows within 3 feet of a setback, so just that may mitigate, that may have to move it anyway. The only thing I see that changed is you're extending the hammerhead, or whatever they want to call that, about another 40 feet south. Why did the road get extended south? Because it's sort of eaten into that back lot.
Per Ed Pesci's comments on having a vehicle turn around, emergency vehicle.
Well, it's no wider than it was before, but they could probably turn into their driveway.
It's at lot 3.
Okay. All right. I'm fine.
So I just.
When you shaved.
I have just a few quick questions for you. What's the intent of the property at this point? Is it going to be strictly residential? Is it going to be commercial? Is it going to be a mix? That's the first question I have, so I just need a little feedback here at the moment.
And I don't have an immediate answer to that one.
Okay, because depending upon, because this is really important, because it's going to govern what the roadway standards are, what's going to happen back there at this point. If it's going to be residential, again, the next question that develops out of that, are there going to be secondary, tertiary dwellings occurring? I think before the board can begin to encompass what we're going to do here with this roadway, and this, mind you, it's a modest subdivision, but it's in a relatively high-density area. So I for one, at the board, I'm going to say by the time you're ready to roll with this at the next meeting, I would really love to know those answers, because I think they're very critical toward the way this is going to develop itself out, at least as one member of the board.
Fair question. We'll try to get you a good answer.
But that's okay. I think Mr. Reed is saying, and he can certainly consult with his client if he needs to for a minute, but I, just as one member of the board, I want to bring that up. Mr. Morris, you?
Just, again, since we're continuing it, but the access to the abutting properties is really a critical issue here as well. I mean, there should be access to the adjoining properties. Ideally, it should be set up as a separate parcel, maybe to become a public way, but until it gets to that point, it should have access to the properties on the east.
You're talking about the Downey Flake?
Yep.
Which properties do you mean?
The Downey Flake property, Downey Flake Inc., and maybe the one in the back, the Canes.
That comes off next to Chris Young's. That won't get there from here. They've already got a structure right there.
Well, I'm looking at the aerial photograph, and there is clearly an area that, again, if there's an opportunity to consolidate curb cuts along that street, that's generally what we strive to do.
Yeah.
So
That was big. We approved the stop shop there.
And just to remind the board of what we did at the bank, to make sure that there were, property owners working together. The commons, there's numerous examples in there that I don't want you to forget.
So, which is going to bring us to two other things, Mr. Reed. I think on the back end of the property, since you're abutting a residential to begin with, you may want to work with them to determine what type of screening may be adequate. The other thing, too, that I need this board to focus on is the Sparks Avenue streetscape. We've worked hard with that with the board, and I think I would really appreciate, as one individual, that you work very closely with staff, because here you go again, we don't get many times to begin to retool this area to what needs to happen for the general welfare of the public. So,
Talking about a sidewalk?
I'm talking about either a sidewalk, bike path, whatever staff feels is going to be appropriate to make this thing function. But here's an opportunity, again, under which to do it at this point. And I, for one, don't want to lose sight of that as a board member here. Okay? So I just want to put it up on the table. Okay? Great, thank you. Anyone else on the board? This is a public hearing, ladies and gentlemen. Would anyone like to comment on this? Oh, howdy.
Victoria Waterhouse, 20 Sparks Avenue. In response to your question about how we want to build this out, our immediate intent, this is family property that's been in the family for over 50 years. Our immediate intent was to try to sell Lot 1. We had never envisioned the subdivision like this. Leslie had told us from a long time ago that the vision for the Mid-Island District was to have storefront right on the street with housing above it. So our original intent, which you guys blew out of the water the first time we were in here, was to have a middle drive with parking in the back and 2 storefronts in the front with apartments up top, and for us to keep the lot in the back. But you guys didn't like that idea. Our intent now is to try to sell Lot 1 so that somebody can put a storefront up, housing up top, parking behind the building. They build that out. They deal with whatever they want to deal with once they buy the lot to do that. Our intention for right now is to keep lots 2 and 3 for ourselves and maybe further down the line for our children. This is not going to be a huge commercial development. We'll keep the residential in the back, away from the street front, and let Sparks Avenue be whatever you guys envision it to be. You know, right now, our big thing is we just want to block ourselves from Stop and Shop.
Okay, great. So I guess I'd probably say Mr. Reed will help formulate that a little bit better, but just...
as far as the entranceways into the other properties,
yeah.
Downey Flake can't afford to do that. They need as much parking as they can get. Their building is right up against the property line. As a matter of fact, their parking lot is actually over the property line. They can't afford to lose those spaces there. And as far as Michael Kane, he's built out and has a fence along our property line, a 6-foot stockade fence along our property line. So he has no road access that direction. It's not such a big deal.
Yeah, I just, as one member of the board, to respond back to that, I'd probably just say to you that I'm glad, thank you for giving us a little bit of an inside look, because it's really important. You know, I think we're going to have to flesh out a little bit what that commercial property is going to look like on the first lot, how that's going to flow, if you're going to do that.
We would like to see storefront, you know,
right.
Light traffic with, you know, residential or even an office space upstairs.
Right, because all those, but here you go. That I think Mr. Reed will walk you through that process, because as much as it's just okay to say commercial, different types of commercial will trigger different types of
well,
things.
Well, as I said, we have no intention of building that out. We plan on selling the lot.
Right, but someone else will, and that's important for us as this becomes a subdivision to be able to begin to flesh out what that all means. It may mean too that, again, and we've got to strongly encourage that you really do want to make sure you work with the people at the Downey Lake and stuff, because if Lot 1 is going to be commercial, there might be a way to start tying these things together, which will be for the mutual benefit of not just the two lots, but also for the general public welfare as well too. And lots 2 and 3, if you're generally considering making sure that they are going to be in the family into the future, as a board, we're probably going to want some type of deed restriction that basically locks those in as being residential only for here on in from the future, as opposed to, I'm just saying to you, these are all within the realm, and this is what your attorney is there for, is to help you kind of coach you through the process. So I just want to give you a little flavor for some of the things that may come up.
We'll discuss all of that. We appreciate your input, and we'll be getting together to come up with answers to those questions as well as the waivers that I mentioned.
Absolutely.
Be ready for the next meeting on all those.
That'd be awesome, because it is fertile territory there. Yeah. Is there anyone else in the audience wishing to comment on this? Board members, do you have anything else? What would be appropriate?
I'll make a motion to continue. Is it June 13th?
Yes.
Okay.
All right, so motion is made to continue to June 13th.
Yeah.
Discussion on the issue?
I know.
Hearing none, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Ayes have unanimously. Great, thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. That brings us to 10-16, which is Skiff Lane LLC, 5 Skiff Lane, for the applicant, Mr. Bodette. Hello again.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Rick Bodette for the applicant, Skiff Lane LLC. The property we're talking about is 5 Skiff Lane. It's in the R10 zoning district. What's before you is a special permit to create a secondary lot under the Nantucket Housing Needs Covenant Program. Each of these lots that you see on the plan that you've already, I believe, agreed to divide under the ANR meets the requirements of the bylaw. There will be a shared driveway. In fact, nothing is going to change from the current site plan that you see before you. The houses are built. It's actually in a condominium form of ownership at this moment. The only quirky matter that you don't see all the time is that the covenant lot will be the larger of the 2 lots. You notice, I think, Lot A is the one that's over 6,000 square feet. And that's it. I can answer any questions you have, but it's going to say exactly the way it is today.
Great. Board members, any questions that you have? Go ahead, Carl.
I think we've had a lot of discussion about stacked parking in the lot for the 2 units. Are we going to have that discussion again today, or is it going to work to have 2 cars stacked up? I'm a little fuzzy on that. Do you think it's going to work, Mr. Bodette, or is it? I don't want to waste everybody's time, but I noticed it on the plan as 4 vehicles stacked. Is there any possibility of that working, or am I just dreaming?
Of course it's going to work. I don't have any indication that it's not going to work now. I think, each dwelling requires 1 parking space, I believe. But to the extent it works now, it's going to work in the future. Now, like I said, nothing's changing.
It's okay. No, fair enough. Board members, is there anything else? Ladies and gentlemen, the public hearing is open at this point if anyone would like to comment on it. Hi, Mr. Sperry.
Craig Sperry, 52 Cato Lane. Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the board, for the opportunity to ask some questions and to perhaps make a request on the special permit. I am the direct abutter at 52 Cato. Commissioner or member Borchert brought up an important consideration because parking is, I think, a big concern here. Right now, if you, at any time, you can go to that lot or that house at 5 Skiff Lane, and there are between 8 to 12 cars parked there. They park stacked on the lots or on the driveway that you see. They also park on Skiff Lane, and they park on the sidewalk in front of the house. So my concern is, of course, that, and the other concern is once this is subdivided, what happens now is the house in the back is used for summer or seasonal employees, and they're not here yet. Now, they're going to show up in the next month or so, along with 4 to 6 more cars. So you can see we have another Essex Road in the making here. So is there some way that we can put some kind of limitation or something to prevent this from happening? I should say further that, and I'm not sure it shows it on that map there, but at the end of Skiff Lane, there's a fire hydrant. And where those cars park, if my house is on fire, those parked cars are blocking access to that fire hydrant. So I suppose my request would be that if there are parking regulations, if you're only allowed to park whatever the number is, 2, 3, 4 cars per structure, that's adhered to, and the cars, I don't know, are they allowed to park on Skiff Lane? Is that allowed?
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, please, go
it's a
ahead.
private road, and they have rights to park in it.
On Skiff Lane?
Yes.
In front of the fire hydrant?
That would be something you would have to call the fire department. We can't. You're more than able to call the fire department to do that.
That can't be made part of the special permit? So it's okay to park 12 cars there?
Go ahead, Andrew. I don't think the fire hydrant's going to.
Well, they can't park within, I believe it's 20 feet of the fire hydrant. So
Right.
they have to be away from the fire hydrant. But a private way, parking along the shoulder of a private way is not a condition that the board imposed. I think you're going outside of the, you can impose conditions on the property that's before you for the special permit. I think you're really, you're getting into other conditions going into that road and restricting people's property rights that they have. That Skiff Lane is only for the property owners. I don't believe you have, through you, Mr. Chairman.
Yeah, please.
You do not have rights in that road, is that correct?
That's correct.
Yeah. Well, it's the difference between a private and a public road, essentially. But
Right, a public road could be, a public road, you could post it as no parking.
Correct. So I think in terms of the fire hydrant, I think Andrew's giving you some numbers at least. But it's going to be up to you to have to make that judgment call about determining to call the fire department and/or police department.
Okay. And to clarify also, if you could, with the Lot A is now the Covenant House, it's my understanding that with the Covenant House, you're not allowed to have additional structures on that lot. Is that correct?
Just go ahead, Andrew.
Oh, yeah, church.
Andrew, go ahead,
Well,
please.
Mr. Chairman, one thing I think that's important,
Can we let?
the first, on the first question, the Covenant House, there's all kinds of restrictions about it not being rented.
Right.
So that, I would think, would change the character of that property. If it needs to be an ownership situation where the owner is present and there's limitations on how often it can be rented. The change in the bylaw allows a tertiary dwelling to go with either one or the other. So a tertiary dwelling could be proposed on one of the properties.
And so there again, so there's a tertiary dwelling on whichever lot. How do the parking regulations work for that? They just get to move in more cars.
One space per tertiary dwelling.
But you see what's happening here?
But they're going to have to come back before us to request that tertiary dwelling to happen, and then we're going to have to examine the property again for its functionality at that stage. That's not currently before us right now.
Correct. And that wouldn't be part of the special permit at this point. It would be something down the road when they propose the tertiary?
Correct. Right. As you said, as you probably heard earlier this evening, I thought you were here earlier this evening, we actually did 2 tertiary dwelling units that had to come before us. So just like secondary dwelling, tertiaries have to also come before the board as well, too, and then we examine the property at that stage to make the determinations.
Sure.
It also has to meet ground cover and
Yeah,
setbacks.
this is.
Right.
They may not have enough room. Are you on sewer back there?
Yes.
Yeah, they may not have enough room.
Exactly.
No,
So
they're
they're
on
still in the
sewer.
same zoning.
We are in the
Still
sewer.
Same zoning setbacks.
But okay, let's not play the guessing game at this point whether it will or won't. The definitive point will be if they choose to decide to file for it. There you go. Does that help a little bit? It's not necessarily the answer you want to hear, but
Nothing's being added, Craig, just because sometimes with these secondary lots, I get this big thing. I'm trying to think of what people are thinking.
Yeah.
It's not a subdivision that's creating more development on this lot, okay? They're separating ownership. That's all they're doing. They're cutting it to separate ownership. You can't do that if it stays contiguous, okay? It isn't making more ground, because Linda said, she's touching on it, just didn't exactly say it the way I'm saying it.
Right.
You can still build, they can build a tertiary if they have the ground cover right now without doing any of this. This has nothing, this isn't making more stuff. This is just making the stuff different.
I understand that.
I just want to make sure that that's understood.
I understand that.
Okay.
But I think you understand where I'm coming from.
I do.
Because right now, the parking is inadequate.
And you said, that, why haven't we done anything yet then? We're going to wait till now, and all of a sudden it's still the same, and all of a sudden it's a problem. It's still exactly the same as it was before. It's just separating ownership. The driveway's exactly the same.
Which he's having a problem with. They need to take out some
I
driveway.
agree, and this is, we deal with this all the time. I mean,
all right.
It's a dead-end street, a private road. People have birthday parties. They park on the side of roads everywhere on the Nantucket. I don't know what to say about
Unless they're having birthday parties every day, they're parking there every day. And so I suppose in closing,
this is also part of back in the day. Was it homeowners associations and some of these other restrictions on private subdivisions that we have today? People have more say than neighbors. This is not one of those. I guarantee there's no homeowners association on Skip Lane.
Yes, there is.
There is?
Absolutely.
Then do
He
something.
doesn't have- no, he has
I'm not part of that
Well,
that homeowners association.
Right. All right. Then the people that are part of it would have to do something about it.
Ones who have rights in Skip Lane.
Right.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah.
Could we make them expand the parking lot on the left side, or I guess it's the south side here, to make it hold four cars, or is that not? It doesn't. Well, I'm just asking. That's what I'm asking.
Let 'em ask.
Would it make? Would it be okay for our parking regulations, our off-street parking regulations?
So,
He has the
Let-
four spaces on site, which is always required to have.
I'm just asking.
just hang on for a second. Do you have something you want to contribute then? On that thought?
The issue with that somewhat is that it puts them into a waiver position for the curb cut now becomes wider than allowed. I mean, it could be, unless you were to reconfigure, if the center became an aisle and then you had parking off it, there's a way to maybe do that to create more spaces. You could set a higher number of spaces. I mean, the bylaw changed when this was built. It was one per dwelling unit. Where's Rick? I believe it was one per dwelling unit. Is that right? So, and it's changed now to it's based on bedrooms for primary and a secondary.
Let's get staff to answer this
So
question.
in the second
please.
dwelling, Rick, how many bedrooms? So it does. It meets the current bylaw, which is 4.
All right. You all set there, Mr. Marklinger?
Well, it's just a suggestion.
No, it's okay. But I did want staff to be able to flesh that out and get you the appropriate answer. Thank you.
I appreciate that.
No problem.
So a question for Andrew. So you say it meets the current bylaw of 4. Is that, are we looking at 8 places there, or is that just 4? 2 and 2, or is that 4 and 4?
2 and 2.
So the 4 is for the entire property. Now, when it's subdivided,
No, 2 for that guy, 2 for that guy.
It's 2 per dwelling.
I see. I got it. Okay. Thank you for clearing that up. I suppose there's just one other comment. I think there was a stop sign on Skiff Lane as it goes on to Cato Lane. It's not there now. It hasn't been there for years. And they tend to come down Skiff Lane and don't stop and go on to... We almost had an incident tonight when I was driving home. Can we see that stop sign is replaced? How do we go about doing that?
I think Mr. Force is...
Right. If that's the original condition, we will notify their homeowners association, make sure that's done.
There you go.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right. Okay. Is there anyone else in the audience wishing to comment on this?
Hearing.
Do I hear a second? Motion's now made and seconded for discussion. Hearing none. All those in favor, please.
Aye.
Sorry, not quite as tall as Mr. Sperry.
Were you all set, Mr. Brodat, before I close this public hearing? I'm sorry.
Yeah, I'm fine. I mean,
okay, great.
And I can talk to the homeowners association about the stop sign as well. I mean, that makes sense.
Oh, I thought you were going to volunteer those parking spaces.
All right, so the motion's made and seconded to close the public hearing. If there's nothing else and no further discussion, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, ayes have unanimously. The pleasure
Motion
of the
to
board.
approve.
Do I hear a second?
Second.
Discussion on the issue. Hearing none. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, ayes have unanimously. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Appreciate it. Next thing before us is 18-16, which is Hillsborough and 15 LLC and 50/50 Properties LLC, 1, 3, 5, and 7 Flint Road and 34 Tomahawk Road. Ms. McGowan.
All right. Mr. Chairman, this is a new application before you. It's for a self-storage facility on what is currently 8 lots in the subdivision known as the Coffin Pit. Those will be combined into 1 lot for 1 single commercial use. The use is a self-storage facility, and it will have it's proposed to have 2 access points, one off of Flint Road and one off of Tomahawk Road. The structure will comply essentially with either the CI or the RC2 zoning, but we are seeking a permit to use the RC2 zoning, which is grandfathered, I believe, through next October. And for one example, in the southeast corner, the structure is 8.6 feet from that setback lot line setback, where only 5 feet is required under RC2, but 10 feet is required under the CI district. We have a proposal that involves a self-storage facility with a footprint of approximately 17,378 square feet, a large one, and then you can see there's the sort of access way, and then there's a long, smaller one. The long, smaller one is about 3,000. This one is about 3,203 feet, and this one is 17.5 roughly. There's also a proposed office space of about 954 square feet and a 2-bedroom apartment, which is proposed to be above the secondary unit, not the main unit. Under the parking calculation in the zoning bylaw, we would need 31 parking spaces for the commercial uses and an additional 2 parking spaces for the 2-bedroom unit. We're proposing to provide 6 designated parking spaces, which are shown here, and then also an additional 13 overflow parking spaces, which would be parallel spaces in the aisle width there. The traffic is expected to be extremely limited. The self-storage facilities that have been approved by the planning board have adopted parking waivers similar to what's being applied for here, and we're expecting that something similar would be approvable in this location. We expect that there would be between 3 and 0 employees on site at most times, so only 1 parking space for employees. The facility is proposed to have 27.8 percent open space, where 30%, actually, no, that's not 30% anymore, is it? No, it is. It's still 30% in the zoning district. No? What is it now, 20? So we're compliant with the open space since the zoning change.
Just for clarification, when you go with RC2, you go with it all. You don't. There's no picking and choosing.
So we're still in the 30%.
You're in 30%.
Okay. All right. So we were requesting the open space waiver. We expect the lighting to be compliant. That there would be screened daily daily trash removal to an off-site facility during peak season and as needed off-site. That there would be a bike rack for employees, that there would be emergency access vehicles available from both sides, actually basically from around the entire facility, since it's essentially a peninsula. And then there's a list of waivers requested, which I'll spare you reading and see if you have any questions. The one thing I would note is that the application for the two-bedroom apartment is only at the HDC now, and by now I mean at the next meeting. So the plans that you have show the original sort of flat-top roofed one-story building, and we would propose somewhere within that to add the apartment. It's not shown in the plans that you have. And I'd also note that the main storage facility is 3 levels tall and 2 levels deep. So if you look at your plans and you're trying to figure out why we have 5 levels, that's why.
Yeah, because of the topography.
And also Don Bracken is here if you have any technical questions.
Great. Board members, do you have anything? Go ahead.
This is a little bit of a unique situation because it has roads around 3 sides of it.
It does.
Whereas the other ones that we've approved, 3, I think, and a previous building for the same applicant, had roads going around interior access to the exterior, the doors.
Right. They had their own aisles. Right.
So you drove around it on the site. How are you getting to the doors that are facing Flint, whereas the building is on Flint? I don't see a way to access. I know the front of the building doesn't have storage in it. The piece on the south, but it doesn't look like they're able to drive around the building like they do on everybody else. So how are they getting in? They're parking on the north side and dragging their stuff around the building.
Yes. I don't know that I would use the word dragging, but I would.
In little things.
It is not intended to be accessible from all of those.
All sides.
All sides,
So you
yeah.
can't drive into every one of them from the roadways that are around it.
Yeah, the design doesn't have those kind of
Okay.
garage door access points. It's mostly interior access.
Okay.
Board members, anything else?
Yeah,
Yeah, Carl.
I'm a little concerned about the loading area, accessing the entire structure with the designated loading area there. Are you having one way in from Tomahawk to Flint, or is it both ways from both roads? It's two-way?
It's two-way.
Apropos of what Ms. Williams said, I have some experience with Nantucket Storage Center, and there's a lot of traffic in there sometimes, unloading and loading materials for storage bins. So I'm just a little curious about this particular design because everything seems centered on that one loading zone, especially if you're going to have extra parallel parking places as overflow parking, because you're accessing a 87,000 square foot facility with one loading zone that does not have anybody driving around the perimeter. I'm a little concerned about that. Maybe you can explain to me how that's going to work. I don't see it working. I think it's going to be jammed up the entire driveway. But I've accessed my own storage unit before many times. It was quite busy in front of the loading zone in that particular spot. And I'm just a little concerned about that at this point.
Yeah, I think that's a legitimate note, Mr. Borchert, and we could certainly look into adding a secondary designated loading area if that's what the board requires.
I have a couple things.
Yeah, go.
On the waivers,
Yeah.
Could we go over some of those?
Sure.
The waiver for the off-street parking,
Yes.
what are we waiving? How many spaces, is that it, or?
Well, like I said, if you look at the application, it would require 31 spaces
Okay.
for the commercial uses, an additional 2 spaces for the residential 2-bedroom apartment. And what we are proposing to provide is essentially 6 designated spaces and 13 additional parallel spaces within the aisle.
So how many less is that?
14.
Ish, okay. And the screening, and is that, are we doing that in all these, in this subdivision? Waiving the screening?
Yeah.
Okay. And the waiver for the driveway access, what does that mean?
Well, we have 2 on the same lot.
Oh, so you're waiving, you have access, not
Yeah.
access,
Yeah.
okay.
We're looking for the second approval for the second access.
And then waive all the site plan review and traffic study, drainage, all that, that's? Oh, I thought it was relative to the site we're talking about.
Well, we have
Go ahead.
we have submitted a substantial amount of material, and we're willing to submit any material that the commission or the commission's consultant deems appropriate.
Okay.
But that waiver tends to help with the 5% maybe that we don't need.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Sure.
Yes, go ahead, Di.
Is there some particular reason that you're not making this lot available with a road that goes all the way around it? It just seems to me, looking at the other places that are built for proposed storage, and you've only got 2 loading, or only 1, and somebody has to take it in and get it across to the other side, you're going to have a backup, and where are those cars going to go as they wait for somebody else to unload?
Mm-hmm. Do you mean that you want more circulation on the lot?
I really think that
Yeah.
more circulation would.
The thing that seemed odd is that, it's essentially surrounded by a road, and then we'd have a little sidewalk, and then we'd have another interior road. But we could certainly look at having more of the lot have vehicle access, which would obviously eliminate open space.
On that Nantucket storage,
Yeah.
you can go in, and you can go, if you're on this side, you can go all the way around, take care of your stuff, and pull out without having any cross traffic. And I think that just makes more sense than what you're asking for without any circumference.
Yeah.
Right.
So I've only been to Nantucket Storage Center once, but my recollection is they essentially have one main door, and everybody sort of parallel parks along the fence and unloads there. Is that?
That may be for right there at that door, which
Yeah.
is what, facing east. But once you get around to the west and north, you can pull up, back up right to your little storage area.
Yeah.
And unload it, so you're not stopping other people from getting by. That path road is wide enough for 2 cars to be there.
Right. Well, I think based on your comments and Carl's comments, we can certainly take another look at the circulation.
I think it would be better.
All set?
Yep, sorry.
Anyone? No, don't be sorry. Anyone else? So I've got a few questions.
Sure.
Because I'm not sure what I'm seeing and my peers are seeing are 2 different critters here at this point. You're suggesting for the main building there's one central access point to be able. So having exterior roadway or trying to use the outside part of it, you're just going through one main bay. Period.
Well, the building has more than one door, obviously, for fire safety and other purposes.
No.
But yeah.
Okay, I'm not talking fire purposes. I'm talking about being able to access the inside of the structure and the bays.
Right.
Everything's taken off that one particular loading area, correct? It's like walking through the facilities.
Right.
They've got outside doors. It's originally approved with doors, either walkway on the right there or doors there.
Right.
So,
You see where it says concrete walkway?
I see where it says concrete, yeah, overhand, yeah. Right. So you're going to be using those particular bays for external access, correct?
Right. And there are other, you can see marked on the plan, there are other doors.
All right. So I just want to make sure with Ed that you've got enough room to accomplish vehicle turnaround in that area, because that is a little bit tight with that overhang and stuff. Okay, if you're going to be accessing those externally, it would be great to have a landscape plan with this thing so we see what it looks like.
Yeah.
I will hope that you do check with the fire chief with the 2 fire exits you have, because quickly I see that he's going to want you to delineate somehow that once you get out the exit, how do you get out totally? Are you going to fence the property, this entire property around him, or is it going to be open?
I think the plan is to leave it open.
Plans to leave it open at this point, all right? If you're going to wind up leaving, wow. See, somehow I'm hoping that you are going to be able to delineate on Tomahawk Road and on Flint Road that there really is no parking on that road. That's going to be for you to figure out, because I can see people trying to do really weird things.
Well, it could be fenced if the board wants to discourage people from pulling up on the side of the road.
I just would like you to talk with staff about it. That's all. What? Go ahead. That's what I'm trying. You see where I'm going, Andrew?
I do, but I think that...
Or will it take care of itself?
Well, I think that maybe having another connection... so those 2 roads are dead-end roads that serve a very limited group of lots.
Yep.
So if somebody were to pull up along the side and have an access to those garage, the path connected out to them directly, I think that would help. No.
No, but okay.
So I think having allowing some edge parking with a connection through might help with having everything jammed up in one location.
That's what I'm trying to figure with traffic flow, because it doesn't look like it's going to work right now. But it does need to be kind of fleshed out a little bit.
I think there might be an opportunity. I don't think you should add a whole. It's pretty much all pavement and buildings now. If you use the existing roadways, which both of those roadways are dead ends that don't, though it's showing individual lots, but most of them have been merged into, single uses. So I think there's an opportunity probably for some temporary parking along the edges of the road, as long as there's a place to connect.
To connect to what? I'm not sure.
Like to the walkway.
Okay.
From the edge of the road in sort of a key location.
So what you're saying, Andrew, is true. Is that on the west side, I think it's basically all where you can't really see where it says Flint Road. The people on the other side, it's all one lot. I think that's Island Gas. Yep. And then on the east side here, those lots are
berries, aren't they?
Yeah, they're not. It's not retail. It's not residential. It's it's a tent company. So it's not like having people park on the road is going to ruin somebody's retail business. But I understand what you're saying. I think we can do a better job of demonstrating access and parking and fire safety.
Yeah,
and landscaping.
And
that would go ahead.
And just the width of the paved road. Do you know what it is,
Don?
24.
I was going to say 24.
What? This width right here?
No, the width of Tomahawk, the of the traveled way.
I don't know exactly. I think it's at least 24. It might be even wider than that.
So parking on one side wouldn't, be the end of the world there.
No. But, I thank you for helping to flesh that out. I don't see running an entire string of asphalt all against the property or the property line. That would be bothersome. I think you can do some things that will make it look nice, integrate well, but it's, again, my concern is just making sure somehow the traffic isn't jamming and it is flowing through.
Yeah, no, I think that is a fair enough observation, and I think that we can do a better job to show you where the access points would be and where Part of this plan we thought was really beneficial was essentially connecting these two dead ends. Really should help with circulation, not just for our lot, but we expect it to be used by other people in the area.
Yeah.
So that's a sort of a unintended consequence of this design, but I think it's a beneficial one for the neighborhood. But we could definitely show you better landscaping and access points, and sort of plot out what we think a busy day would look like in a couple of scenarios.
Right. I think that as one member of the board, I know that would be really helpful.
Sure.
Yeah. Did you have anything else, Andrew or Leslie?
Nope.
No. Anything else from the board members?
Just one
Yeah,
question.
please.
Is there a designation for a one-way in and one-way out, or is it?
Not currently. It's planned to be multi-directional.
I'm just wondering if that multi-directional will cause some traffic when you have people coming in. It's 30 feet wide. If they start parking along the sides, and there's just one access down the middle, and if it's both ways, would it be beneficial to make a designation one way in, one way out?
We can. Frankly, we wanted to wait and see what Ed Pesci thought about that before we got too specific. We've sketched it out a bunch of ways, and I know Don was looking forward to getting Ed's comments on that exact issue. So I'll wait till we get those, if that's okay.
Yeah, I think that would probably be a good idea, because I'd like a little more practical experience from other things that have worked like this.
Yeah.
Because it might just be a center stripe down, and one's one way, one's the other way. But again, that's something I really want our engineer and Mr. Bracken.
Yeah, I know we had sketched it about a bunch of ways, and we decided to get Ed's comments first before pitching it.
That'd be awesome. Just like that. Anything else? Yeah, go.
Just a suggestion. Move this way one. Okay?
Yeah.
Put this down here, with your egress here for the office, and make another one. Another loading spot here. This goes here.
Yeah.
Maybe lose two. Just a suggestion. It may work it better with two dedicated loading areas, 50 feet instead of 25 feet.
Yeah, I think we can
At
work.
this early stage,
I think we can work on having an expanded loading area.
Anything else? This is a public hearing, ladies and gentlemen, if anyone would like to comment on it. Not seeing any hands at this point. The appropriate for us to
I don't know if Don had any.
I'm sorry? Did you have anything else? Don?
Not any further until the next meeting.
Okay.
I'll make a motion to continue this to June 13th.
Do I hear a second? Motion's now made and seconded. Discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, ayes have it unanimously.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Do appreciate it. Next thing before us is 1916, which is Amos Hochstetter Jr., Stephen W. Kidder, and Michael Puzo, trustees of A&B Realty Trust, 53 Baxter Road. Mr. Reed, good evening.
Mr. Chairman, again, Arthur Reed for the applicants. This is a pretty simple application, although it involves going before both the ZBA and the Planning Board. This is on the bluff out in Sconset, and my clients want to move their house laterally to the north, which has the effect of getting the house, which is in the front yard setback, as is the garage, getting it farther away from the top of the bank. In connection with that, and the actual movement of those structures within the front yard setback will be before the Board of Appeals on Wednesday. The issue for the Planning Board is the width of the driveway entrance. The existing driveway entrance is, as it's measured at the point where the driveway hits the traveled way, not rather than at the lot line. That's the way the bylaw is written. Is 43.3 feet wide, and we will, in the course of doing this, be able to reduce that to approximately 37.9 feet. Obviously, that's wider than what the what the bylaw calls for, but the way that this property is laid out with the situation of the bluff and so on, the existing structure, what that does is give us the minimum we really need in order to be able to keep the 2 parking spaces adjacent to the garage as they move north, and at the same time be able to access the parking within the garage itself directly from the street. That's basically it.
Board members, any discussion on this?
I'm fine with it.
Anything, Andrew, Leslie? No? This is a public hearing, ladies and gentlemen, so if anyone would like to comment on this.
Motion to close the public hearing.
Do I hear a second?
Second.
Motion is now made and seconded. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, ayes have unanimously in the pleasure of the board.
Motion to approve.
Do I hear a second? Motion's made and seconded for discussion. Hearing none, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, ayes have unanimously. Thank you, Mr. Reed.
Thank you very much.
Next thing before us is 20-16, which is Nantucket Land Bank, 2A Massasoit Bridge Road. Mr. Gasparo, good evening, sir.
Thank you. For the record, Arthur Gasparo for the Land Bank. I'm before you tonight requesting a special permit to put an addition on an existing structure located within the Moorlands Management District. Maybe I'll just give the staff just a second. I don't know if you want to put it up on the screen. Or we are located out just on the east side of Massasoit Bridge Road on a 64-acre parcel, and there are 2 existing single-family dwellings, as you can see there, and on one of them we're proposing to make some what I would consider modest modifications to put an addition of a few hundred square feet and construct a 220 square foot garage to replace a portion of the existing structure. And again, we've laid out there the existing structure is a ground cover footprint of about 759 square feet, and we're looking to go up to about 1,100 square feet. And that's in terms of ground cover and not structural area. I have provided staff with a little extra information just prior to the hearing to clarify understanding in this district that it also has to do with square footage that's related to decks as well as ground cover as it's defined in the zoning district. But I think that overall it doesn't negatively impact the scope of the application, especially given the overall size of the property. And I'd be happy to try to address questions or concerns that you have. I don't see that the application would in any way be contrary to the interest that this board is charged to protect.
Great. Board members, any discussion on this? Anything from staff? Public hearing is open, ladies and gentlemen. If anyone would like to comment on this.
Motion to close the public hearing.
Thank you.
Second.
Motion's made and seconded for discussion. Hearing none. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, ayes have unanimously in the pleasure of the board.
Motion to approve.
Do I hear a second? Discussion. Hearing none. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, ayes have it unanimously.
Thank you very much.
Great. Next thing before us is 21-16. Arthur Reed Jr. is trustee of Glenhurst West Realty Trust, 137 Cliff Road and 11 Chase Links Circle. Sir.
Thank you very much. Again, Arthur Reed, as attorney really and as trustee for the trust that owns the property. This is not my own personal residence. It's a little out of my price range, I'm afraid. In any event, what we're dealing with here is property which fronts on Chase Links Circle. Confusingly, the assessor still gives part of the property an address on Cliff Road. It doesn't front on Cliff Road. It fronts on Chase Links Circle, and I think we're in the process of getting that straightened out. In any event, there is at the present time in construction on this project, the main house, a secondary dwelling, which will be a guest house that will be used by the owner's family, and a garage. And the point has come up of being able to put a tertiary dwelling on the top floor of the garage in order to house my client's household employees during the during the summer season. We would meet all the requirements for a tertiary dwelling, except that the ground cover of the garage which is being built as a garage, it's already started, will be 780 square feet, and the maximum in the definition of tertiary dwelling is set at 650 feet, with the provision, however, that the planning board can waive that. The result of approving this increase in the size of the tertiary dwelling will have absolutely no effect upon the ground cover, obviously, of the structures on the lot, which will be well within the maximum, and we would therefore ask that you approve it. There are some conditions that are set forth in the staff report, which I think are basically the same conditions that you already have in connection with the secondary dwelling, and obviously we're fine with all of that.
Question?
Yeah. Go ahead.
Is Chase paved all the way up to the circle now?
I think it is. I think that's in now.
Okay.
Anyone else on the board have any questions? Andrew, Leslie, you good?
Yes.
Okay. Public hearing is open, ladies and gentlemen. If anyone would like to comment, seeing no hands.
Motion to close the public hearing.
Do I hear a second?
Second.
Motion's made and seconded. Discussion. Hearing none. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, ayes have unanimously. Pleasure of the board.
Motion to approve per staff recommendations.
Do I hear okay. Discussion. Hearing none. All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Those opposed, ayes have unanimously. Great. Thank you, Mr. Reed.
Thank you very much again.
Please, gentlemen, do you need like 5 minutes? Do you want to just go a little further and see where we get? Pardon?
Okay.
All right, so we've been at this for a bit, ladies and gentlemen.
Get back at 9.
What? Ninth inning? Yeah,
Nine,
well,
9
5
o'clock?
minutes.
Good.
5 minutes, so 5 minutes and 9. Just the exam. 5 minutes should be out.
That's like the shady rain.
Oh, yes, ma'am.
Which is where you can't allow that in the mid-hour. No, I agree.
Yeah.
But I think what we have to do.
Perfect.
I've seen that. Nantucket.
Well, that's what it's and if that comes in,
That's why I created because this next stuff may triple.
Well, the next stuff, I mean, it's not prepared by, no, these plans are crap. These, especially for this.
How you doing?
I'm following me everywhere.
That's really the only time.
But I saw the schedule but no matter what
I could tell as soon as you walked in there.
So don't.
Yeah, let's do it. Next time, don't throw it away.
Oh, we got challenge?
That's nice. You know, Will used to do that.
See, I don't know about that. Well, all right, so, but here you go. If it was a function, let's say it's a special, let's say you bring out a special permit, it now defaults to other alternates like that. I can't do that. Do I have to incorporate a necessity? No, I understand. She's I know. But she's just crazy, kind of this weird. But you know what? So, and ego, I'm this one said. Right. That's why I said, yeah, you don't want to, yeah, that's why I want us to be safe. Right. It was, yeah, right, absolutely. So, but believe me, by our next meeting, we'll get that whole thing resolved. Let's get the chirps back together. So, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to try to reconvene at this point, please. Thank you. Thank you for allowing us a few minutes. We really do appreciate it. So next thing before us at this point, with the board now reconvened, is going to be 22-16, which is Walter J. Glowacki for 4 Perry Lane. Mr. Kyberg, good evening.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman. Peter Kyberg for Walter Glowacki for this application. Mr. Glowacki owns 4 and 6 Perry Lane. We've submitted 2 separate applications indicating on 6 Perry Lane that we want to move a garage onto there. It's a pretty modest plan. The garage is pretty modest in size, and it will house 1 old car. I think probably of more concern is 4 Perry Lane, where he intends to proposes to construct a 70 by 49 foot steel storage building. It will be shingled. He has, as we all know, a lot of storage up around the so-called pit right now that he is in the process of removing. Most of that, those items, machinery and so forth, will be moved off island. Some of the items are personal to him, have some sentimental value, or just being used. He needs to remove everything from the pit area and proposes to select just certain items, like I said, that have some sentimental or immediate actual practical value to keep on Nantucket, and is constructing this storage building for that purpose. He does not propose any sort of commercial use of the building. He will not be renting out storage to anyone. He will not be renting out storage to anyone, nor will he be taking money or anything like that. Again, he promised to the Richmond Company in the pit area that he would get his junk out of there, which he's doing and will do, and proposes to keep some of his own personal items in that storage building. I do not expect, as I said, that there's going to be any noxious noise. I know that there will be some concern, perhaps from my sister from an abutter, probably a concern, I suspect, about outdoor storage or just turning it into, what is currently around the pit right now, so-called. And obviously that is not the intention, and I believe that this board has, the regulatory power to make certain requirements that if the application is approved, that there will be certain aesthetic values that we would need to observe with respect for the neighbors. It is in an RC2 zone. The commercial uses are allowed by special permit. We propose to plant Leland cypress and fence. There will be also 1 proposed shared driveway rather than 2 for 4 and 6 Perry Lane, although, as I said, it will be 4 Perry Lane that will have the large steel shed building. And that's pretty much it.
Board members? Do you go ahead?
Peter, I see where we approved at the HDC level, we approved the 5-in-1 fence or 6-foot board fence around the east and the south. I did have a call from somebody who I believe is on the south. Sarah, you're representing? Correct. You'd have to go back to the HDC of extending that 6-foot fence even further down that lot line. The HDC didn't want it too far down, but I thought we had approved it down to the front of where that building is. Another, 20 some odd feet. And then it was to pick up another fence. And I don't see the fences clearly called out here where they're supposed to be. I know there's screening on the other side. So I'm a little concerned about the screening. I don't know if you can legally give yourself an easement I know you got a driveway that's going to split between the two, but I don't think you can give yourself an easement.
I think there's a way to do that, and I don't think
Okay.
it would be inventing anything new. I think that's been done before, and I think that can be done.
And I know there's a lot of neighbors here, so I'll just wait and keep going after they go, but I think it's a lack of screening and a little bit more fence needs to go there. And I don't think there should be any exterior storage of any goods or materials. I know that was another concern of some of the neighbors, is that there'd be some place for them to put stuff outside. I think everything, because of the size of the building, needs to be inside the building. And the HCC did require it, though it is a steel-framed building, the HCC required it to be shingled. I don't remember if it was a standing seam roof. I know the walls had to be shingled.
And we will.
But what was the roof? Was that standing seam?
I'm not sure.
Because it's coming in as a metal building. But
Say it again?
It was coming in as a metal building because that's what
Mhm.
it is. It's lying out there in pieces at former Galackyville. And I just know that they saw this steel building on here, and I just know that there's at least the sidewalls had to be shingled, so I don't remember about the rest of it.
Okay, I will chase that
There was
down.
some concern about everybody else out there on Campin's building, the one next to him, they all had to be shingled.
Looks to me like a standing zinc roof or steel roof, or if that's what you called it, yeah.
Okay.
Looks that way to me.
Okay. Thanks.
And,
Anyone else?
mhm.
I'm sorry, Linda, you also, I'm so sorry. Anyone else?
Well,
Go ahead.
does this meet the site plan minimum standards? For example, drainage and,
Parking.
things like
The
that.
basic things.
It's in the wellhead protection district, so they will need to get a certificate of water quality compliance.
Yeah.
But minor site plan review does not trigger the higher level engineering review.
We do have from Bob Gardner a water quality certificate for 4 Perry Lane, and we have a letter from him saying that he doesn't think it's required for 6 Perry Lane because of the low intensity of development.
So, if I may, and I just need to, I'm not as familiar with these as I'd like to be. I'll be very upfront with you, but would it be prudent for them to show some type of parking arrangement on both these? Okay, so that's something we need to do. I do agree with Linda. You're really going to have to develop the screening for us. Cross easement, I think you should be able to do that between the two properties. I feel confident with that, but both for 4 and 6, you'll need to file cross easements with us. Absolutely no exterior storage whatsoever. The last thing, and I'm here again, I'm a little fuzzy and I need a little direction from staff, is there a way to put this building into some type of restricted form, either through a deed restriction, so that if any of the uses, if they want to try to change use on it, it comes back before us? Because I think that's an important thing, is that here we are today, we're saying, yeah, the family's going to use it, they're going to use it for storage, and how quick they have sat on this board before as well, too, and 12, 24 months later, something changes, and everything starts to change around it. So I want that intent to be memorialized somehow, so that if something does change, it does come back before us. On 6, I'm not quite as worried about, but I think and I hate kind of crossing over here, but we're probably going to have that same conversation with a lot of these things. Okay.
One more question.
But those at a minimum, I think, are going to be kind of what I want to see. It probably wouldn't hurt to have either like a landscaping or a little bit more of an architectural print here before us, just so we can kind of get a sense of what it looks like. Yeah, I'm talking about for the entire site. I'm not talking about the building itself. I'm just talking about...
I imagine you're more interested to see how the screening is going to be blocking the building.
Bingo, absolutely.
Okay.
I mean, I see little dots representing the Leland Cyclists. I get it, but I just...
How big and where are they and how much
just
do
to
they
get
block?
I'm not suggesting go overboard either,
Okay.
but it would just help to get a little bit better of a visual sense, I think.
Okay.
So that we understand what we're doing. Go ahead.
Just one more thing before we go to the public. Again, going down north and south property lines, a little bit more going on there. I know there's been some comment about the fact that it's cited at 5 foot, which is the minimum side yard setback there. You do have a little bit of an overhang, which
That
does
concerned
count
me
for
too.
setback.
That concerned me too. I'd like to see 6 or 7 feet. Just, I've only been doing this for 23 years, but I've seen 5 feet turn into 4 feet.
And change.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think moving it off the back line away from the residences behind you, because those are residences, and moving it a little
Okay.
bit farther south off the northerly property line, because you've got room to do it, and you've got more than enough area for legal parking, because in this building it's 1 per 900, no employee count. So there's not many spaces there. So I just think you got to develop the site plan a little bit more and try to massage the location and the screening on this thing. And I don't think we're going to get into hours of operation because it's dead storage.
I'm hopeful that this is not a commercial operation whatsoever, is what I've been told, and I take that on face value, and so hopefully there's no hours of operation or any discussion like that.
Because it'd be dead storage for one entity. That's
it.
where I'd be headed if we're going down that road, so there's not multiple tenants. Because across the street, we allowed both those buildings to have multiple tenants.
Right.
I know there's some hours, there's some screening things for the guys across the street. But I think we just need to flesh this out a little bit because it's not as long. Those buildings across the street are probably another 30-some-odd feet longer than this building. It's wider, and it's got a flatter pitch. So most of the standing seam roof metal buildings we've done at the HCC are 2 pitches, 2 to 4 pitch. This is a 2 pitch, which is a little bit unusual, but it's not unusual for those kinds of buildings that we've approved all over the island in the commercial zones. So I think we need to be a little sensitive to the guys behind you, and at the end of the cul-de-sac, that's all residential. So.
Yeah, that's why I kind of asked them for some type of deed restriction process to the building itself, or something to restrict uses.
Conditions.
Well, yeah, but
Special
something that will just kind of, like I said, memorialize it, and I think that solves the hours of operation issue. And granted, too, this is a public, this is before us with public hearings, so if we don't feel like it's flowing well, we can come back and do it again. Not that we want to. Not that
Please,
we
Mr.
want
Chairman.
to. Yeah.
I'd like to see stamp plans by an engineer and a surveyor. This says this guy's a professional engineer, but he ought to stamp the plans and sign them.
Okay.
There's a note in the application that if you need the surveyor, you're going to get Paul Santos. I think that's probably a pretty good idea.
Well, they have to flesh it out.
Deal out of it, but at least,
Go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, the one thing I noticed that I think is good is that there aren't doors opening, around into the area between the fence, because I think that area has to be. I think there has to be a condition about ongoing conditions here. Just that area shown as loamed and seed is continued to be maintained as that and doesn't become other things over time. And that there should be no storage between the fence and the building in those particular areas. I think
No exterior storage at all.
of anything, and I think it needs to be kept in a certain good order, because again, those areas are very narrow around the building, between a fence, and they're going to be shaded. So, kind of what's happening there.
no outside storage.
Right, and again, I think there isn't any doors, so it's not like someone can easily come out and start putting stuff, which is fine. I think that this area ultimately will probably go to the commercial neighborhood district. That's really, if you've been there recently, that's kind of its character. And so if the setback in CN, that's not the setback now. I understand that, but closer to 10 is preferable. Where it abuts the R5 neighbors on the other side. And just for the record, I'm not an abutter to this. I'm in the subdivision, but I want to be clear that I'm not within the 300 feet. So,
Or if it does go to CN and the building will not be pre-existing non-conforming, so every time they breathe on it, they have to come back in here. So if you pull it out to 10 feet on both sides, the east and the north, then it's a conforming structure.
Yeah.
If it's inside, once it changes, because then it becomes grandfathered and you can't breathe on it. You can't do anything until you come back in here.
I understand. Yeah, I agree. That's a good point.
Yep.
Yeah. Anything else from the board? Ladies and gentlemen, this is a public hearing. If anyone would like to comment on this. Ms. Alger, good evening. Again.
Yes,
Hi.
Sarah Alger. I represent the abutter immediately to the south, and they live there. It's their residence, and they are concerned about this, and they wrote a letter, which I think didn't get into the packet. It just arrived today. I agree completely with what Mr. Marklinger said about the need for better plans in this particular case. You really can't tell what's going on here without a good set of plans. They should show their drainage, their parking, their screening. I'd like to see the landscaping and screening go all the way around the property. Not built right on the setback line, just because it's crowding the building up against those people to the north and east. The plan should show the open space. It would be great if it would show, I think usually our plans show the zoning, open space, the abutters, identifies the abutters. And then just in general, what they're proposing, it is a pretty easy use as long as they do what they say they're going to do and they keep it all inside. But I will note that my client did point out that there's already a broken tractor, a dilapidated recreational vehicle, and a pile of scrap metal on the property already without any authorization from anyone, and that's not heading in the right direction. And maybe that pile of scrap metal is the building. I'm not sure. I'm a little worried about that. And I'm a little worried about enforcement, to be honest with you. Once this gets going, who's going to be out there making sure that this list of boats, recreational vehicles, snowmobiles, that whole list of things that were in the application are all parked inside and not kind of broken down all over the property? That's the concern.
Point. Thank you.
Thank you.
And your point is well taken. Like I said, I don't think the applicant wants to come back before us if we have to reopen a special permit public hearing again.
Right.
So I think your neighbors who you're assisting at this point can kind of take some stock in that.
Right. We're hoping that the decision will be clear, that it's all interior, that it's for one user, that it's not to become a permitted, I guess, junk dealer is what's in the bylaw now that I see people coming in for from time to time. And that it really is just for personal use and storage. So we're hopeful, but I'd love to see some teeth put in the decision.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Go ahead. Can I go to her, or do you want to? Is this germane to where we are?
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Can we move forward by? Make sure that
Conditions.
I don't think so. I think that's outside of your, enforcement comes through any of our zoning enforcement officers, and that's been expanded. So I do, Mr. Chairman,
Yeah,
sorry,
go ahead.
before we move on, I do think something about lighting should be clear on this too, to understand what is proposed and where that's going to be.
Yep.
Dark skies.
Good point.
Just to reiterate that other point that we were talking about, what was just mentioned, is that unlike the ZBA, the planning board can open, upon a complaint or request, the planning board can reopen a public hearing on something like this and fix it or put more conditions on it. So without a lot of hoorah, as opposed to the ZBA having to have a whole new application, et cetera, et cetera. So this is a much better place for them to be in, because we have more control.
Great. Thanks for being patient with us.
Hi. No, thank you. Logan Gomez, Essex Road, and I'm directly behind 6
Perry Lane. And I think my brother, the house is in our family, my brother's been in touch and has voiced his complaint and concern for what's happening here. About 2 winters ago, a tree that, after Mr. Glowacki clear-cut the lot, a tree that had been semi-planted in the back right up against our property line came down in the first winter storm. And it took about 2 weeks before someone finally came and cleared it. My experience is that they have had zero interest in the property and the upkeep of the property thus far. I have 2 young boys that are very curious about the big machine that's out there with a blade pointed right at our back property line, and then the metal fencing that is just strewn about the property as well. So we're very concerned. We have young kids. The neighbors to our right and left also have young kids that play in their backyards. We had a nice privet of scrub oak up until that lot was clear cut. And I know in these plans they talk about this fence, a 6-foot fence going along that back property line in 4 Perry Lane, but I ask that you consider that they continue that fence, because right now there are maybe 3-foot cypress trees that were stuck in the ground crooked along our back property line.
Both. We at the HDC, we required 2 separate applications to run the 6-foot fence across that entire rear of 4 and 6, so they connect.
Okay. And here it mentioned it under 4, but I didn't see it under 6. So we just, because that's right along our backyard, when his tree came down, it crashed into our vegetable garden, never an apology or anything. So I'm just concerned that that lot will be left there, and there'll be no regard for the upkeep and what it looks like.
Now, we wanted to make sure that the guys on Essex with the kids, and I knew where you lived, had a full 6-foot fence.
Thank you, and thank you for that.
The entire length of that back end.
And when would that have to go up, just out of curiosity, when this construction starts? At the beginning or at the end of his?
We could make it contingent on that.
You know, I know with the families in that neighborhood, it would be very helpful for that to go up at the beginning, if that's possible.
And so just a few things very quickly, because you said you were about 6. Believe me, and 6 is a separate application we're going to get to in a few moments.
Mhm.
I think you'll hear the word IBID used very quickly. Just repeat carbon copy of the same. At least that's my gut reaction. The other thing, too, is I think certainly as this is developing along, before we get to the next planning board meeting, I'd make a call to Mr. Kyberg and have him give you a little bit of insider's view about what's going on.
Mhm.
I'm sure they'd love to work with you.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you.
Thanks. Anyone else? Go ahead, Sarah.
Can I just ask for a clarification?
Yes,
'Cause
please,
I
ma'am.
believe my client misread the plan, but I just want to be sure. In that area on 4 that says loam/seed and landscape, that's what they're proposing to do to that area, right? They're not proposing to stockpile loam and seed and landscaping materials there, are they?
Mr. Kyberg, you're up.
I will represent that is not what his plan is, but again, I'm not him, so I don't know what he's thinking, but as far as I can tell, as far as I can divine from everything that's been told to me, that is just landscaping and not a landscaping business, storing anything.
Okay. That's what they indicated at the HTC also.
Okay.
That it was yard.
That's good. That's great.
Great. Anyone else in the audience wishing to comment on this? Not seeing anyone.
Motion to continue to June 13th.
All right. Do I hear a second? Discussion? You all set? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, ayes have unanimously. So that brings us to 6 Perry Lane.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for 4. And
so go ahead. Is there anything else you want to add to this, or
there isn't. I think the use is a lot less intense. Again, just a garage. I believe that already exists. That he's planning on moving over there for 1 car.
And I'm probably just going to say to you, I think you understand the board. Although these are 2 separate applications, and they'll be treated that way, still looks at it as a consolidated plan. So I probably dare say anything that we've discussed so far is going to begin to appertain to the same process.
I understand.
What you're going through. I don't think we need to repeat ourselves here.
I understand.
Is there anything else? Okay. So anyone else wishing to comment on this in the public at the moment? Because it is open. Not seeing anyone. take a motion to continue as well, since...
I'll make a motion to continue to June 13th.
Great, and that motion's made and seconded. Discussion, hearing none. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, ayes have it unanimously. Great, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Greatly appreciated, Mr. Bradley. Excuse me. Next thing before us, 24-16, Michael F. Boylan, 3B Windy Way.
Good evening. My name is Mike Boylan. I'm the owner of the UPS store at 2 Windy Way, and I'm requesting a one parking space waiver across the street at 3B Windy Way, which I own. And the plan is, as per the notes, that I'm planning to move there next year in August.
Board members, anything you'd like to discuss on this one? Anything from staff? No. Ladies and gentlemen, the public hearing is open on this if anyone would like to comment.
Motion to close the public hearing.
Do I hear a second?
Second.
Discussion. Hearing none. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Thank you for your time.
Hang on, we're
Hold
not
on.
done yet.
I'm sorry.
but
We just
that's
closed the
okay.
public
We're-
hearing.
We're close.
Sorry.
Motion to approve.
I'm a little nervous.
That's okay. No, just so you know, motion is made second for approval. Discussion. Hearing none. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, ayes have unanimously. Thank you, sir.
Thank you for your time.
My pleasure. Okay, next thing before us is 25-16. Nantucket Cottage Hospital is the owner, 5759 South Prospect Street, 10 Vesper Lane, for the applicant.
We're not going to go through all this. It's been 3 hours.
I'm sorry, we'd like a decision tonight. You have to go through it now. Thank you very much. I appreciate it, sir.
Y'all can sit up front if you want. Catherine needs one? What do you want? It's on.
Great.
That's on.
Okay.
Just need him to line something up, or are we good to go?
We're good to go.
Beautiful. Please,
All
for
right.
the record, sir.
For the record, my name is John Tuig. I'm here representing Nantucket Cottage Hospital. We did put together a presentation. We recognize that you have been going for 3 hours now, so maybe you don't want all of our presentation, so we will try to be brief. We'll try to walk through this as quickly as we can. Just to give you a sense of the development team, many of the things that you see in your booklet, again, some will touch base on, some we won't go through in great detail. Frank Kovac from Nantucket Cottage Hospital, John Jennings from Canada Design, our architect. The two other people that you'll hear speaking tonight, Rich O'Connell and Steve Glowacki from R.J. O'Connell. They're our civil engineers that focused on stormwater and related issues. Bill Fleming did our landscaping, and myself and Tim Sullivan, my colleague, is off to the left. We're not going to go through why we need a new hospital and the benefits of a new hospital. Thank you very much. I think we'll all, I'd ask you all to consent that we do, and you've certainly heard us here before talking about that. But I will focus just for a minute on the approval process. We have been doing a lot of outreach. As you may remember, obviously we did the annual town meeting where we redefined the hospital use. We set forth a lot of parking requirements. We changed the height in this zone to 50 feet. We made it applicable to a major site plan review for hospital development, and we created an overlay district and put all of the land in the commercial neighborhood zone. That was all the history of that. And you'll see up here in the zoning district that was really at the top of what you see is the hospital, and then the bottom down at the land, that's the 16, 18, and 20 Vesper, which is really where the Coast Guard's located, UMass, and where the hospital owns a parcel. So that was all rezoned as part of that. One of the actions you took tonight was approval of the ways. As you may remember, there were some private ways that surrounded the hospital site. And actually, Mr. Vorse, you should be aware we got notice at 5 o'clock that the land court agreed with the town to decertify them from land courts, and they're now available. We just actually received that. So that was the other action that was taken. For purposes of tonight,
would like to run through, and again, we'll do this as expeditiously as possible given the hour, is touch a little bit on the site plan approval, talk about the standards, show you the site, what we propose to demolish or relocate, talk about the proposed project, a little bit about the zoning, site plan, and then have Rich O'Connell and Steve Iwaki touch on grading and drainage, access and egress, site lighting, and the preliminary subdivision plan. Mr. Chairman, with your approval, there is a preliminary subdivision plan, and I know you'll open on that. We'll touch on that here because that's sort of related to the overall project. And then finally, construction management. We did file a construction management plan with your package. We'll just touch on it briefly. But these were the major topics that I think people would like to see. And what you see here in the performance standards, really the relief that you'll find when we looked at the design and focused on the design, all of these things that you have to find, access, pedestrian circulation, vehicular circulation, sidewalks, visibility, landscaping, utilities, storage and screening. Those were our watchwords and our focus when the design was done. Existing site, I think everybody knows it. It's outlined there in 2 yellow pieces, which is the main site off of Prospect, and then also across the street at 10 Vesper. If people don't know, hospital has owned that for many years, and that is part of what we're doing as part of the site plan application, so we highlight it. The existing footprint. This gives you a sense of, and I'm going to use some names tonight, and I think most people who have been to the hospital and know what I'm talking about. Obviously, you have the main hospital that you see there. You also have the Founders Building, where a lot of the activities, especially related to the POPs, occur. You have the dormitory building right here, and then you have the Anderson Building right here. So that's our site, and that's what you have going on a daily basis today. I'm going to walk through these quickly, but it just gives you a relationship to what we're trying to do. The dormitory building, we did go to the HDC. We filed with the HDC. We had our first meeting with them last week, and we asked for approval to demolish the dormitory building. Now, we did ask approval to demolish that. We did offer it up to town and others who might like that building. It was built as a dormitory building, and we're certainly willing to make that available. The second one is 10 Vesper. 10 Vesper is about a 900 square foot home, which is across the street. We did ask for permission to demolish or move that off, and I think in discussions with Andrew about opportunities for where that might go from affordable folks who might like that, we're happy to make that available, and I think Andrew's going to give me a home for that in the near term. So that's really down there. And then what we'd like to do is take the Founders Building, which is up there, and we're going to move the Founders Building, and we're going to move it down to 10 Vesper. Those are important activities that go on in that building. And what we're trying to do, and this is no great rocket scientist, is we have an existing building that we have to keep open for the next 2 years. We have to build a new hospital that's going to ring around it. We have to get sort of buildings out of the way. And one of them is moving the Founders Building. Secondly is taking the Anderson Building. We need the docs who are in that building to have a place to be while we're building that new hospital. So we're going to take the Anderson Building, and we're going to move that over next to Greenlight. There's an open area over there, so we're literally going to take that building and shift it over to Greenlight. Again, we're creating this space, this workspace, that's going to allow that. As part of Greenlight, just so people know, it's not the subject of what you have here, but it was a discussion, and we put a note on the site plans that moving Greenlight, adjusting Greenlight as it relates to the bike path and the sidewalk is something that we're going to undertake, and we made that commitment to the HDC, so we'll be able to address that issue, and that is noted on the site plan. And then finally, as you move through, this is what we want to end up with. And you wonder how the size and the footprint of that building came about. Well, that sort of fits right into where we need to keep this building alive for the next 2 years. Yes, we can say we're exciting designers, or we're making it fit and work in that space. But all kidding aside, we spend a lot of time because people want to have all of the uses that they'd like to see, the services to be in that building. So the interior programming of that building and the shape was something we spent a great deal of time on, because this truly is a once-in-a-generation opportunity. I mean, this is an opportunity to build this hospital. You don't do it often, and we want to be sure we get it right. So at the end of the day, Founders down here, Anderson moved up here, and then the new hospital. So that's our footprint. That's where our focus is. Just very briefly, this is in your materials. We'll go over it, obviously, with Ed Pesci. It's all the various zoning requirements that are under the Nantucket Cottage Overlay Zone. The most important column is this one, namely, do we comply with all those things? But obviously, Ed Pesci will confirm that. A little bit of comparison. People ask us all the time, well, how is it different than the existing hospital? If you add up all of the existing hospital, including Anderson Building and the like, everything that's on our site that we use for the hospital today is about 100,000 square feet. When we build the new hospital and add back in the fact that you saw Anderson and you saw Founders, it's about 115,000 square feet. We have tried to be, in wonderful Nantucket fashion, to be careful with what we did, to reuse what we could, and to build it. Yes, it's going to be bigger, but to also be just realizing what it costs to build it, to think through that process. Height, the existing hospital is 35, 42, 45, and 47, but depending on where you are, the proposed hospital is about 45. Parking spaces, 250 today, 238 in the future, and we'll show you that on the access and parking plan. It sounds like we're going down in parking, and that technically is true, but this 238, as you'll see in our plans, is much better parking. It's actually parking that you can use, that's laid out well, and will function appropriately. And just one small piece about operating rooms, 1 versus 2. Most of the hospital, I have to say today, unfortunately, does not comply with state licensure requirements, including the fact we don't have 2 operating rooms. If you're going to allow to have people have children on the island, you have to have 2 operating rooms. It's something we've sorely needed. We'll have that. And that's just one of the many things, which is why we put a footnote here. A lot of the design of the hospital, operating rooms, corridor widths, accessibility, HIPAA regulations on privacy, mechanical systems, all of those things meet a very stringent Department of Public Health requirements. And that's why a lot of what we design and how we designed it and the uses we put in it are there. And just one other note that's here, height comparison, just to give people a sense. Nantucket High School at its peak is 50.5. The Boys and Girls Club, 47.5. It's in our area. Just gives you a sense. Site plan. Actually, this is the black and white site plan that you have. I'm going to ask Tim to go to the next one, which is really the same site plan, but done in a landscape fashion. Obviously, stormwater upgrades, utilities, HVAC, pedestrian activities. Let me just walk you through very quickly the site plan. So we have our site here that you have the site today. You have the Founders Building moved over onto 10 Vesper. You have the Anderson Building, or where the docks are, moved next to Greenlight. There's an existing entrance here. Well, that's going to be moved up. The main entrance of the hospital is going to be right here. We're going to separate the main entrance of the hospital to the emergency and service access to the hospital, because the emergency room is going to be placed up here. So when the ambulance are going to come in, they're going to come in here. The ambulance will pull in right in this area here, and that'll be the emergency room. And the helipad will actually be near the emergency room where it should be. Because if you think about the helipad today and how you have to get to the emergency room and take everybody through the hospital. So some of the thinking was, how can we put the helipad in the right place? And we're going to show you in a second a little bit more information on the helipad, but also try to relate all the uses, the things that go on in the hospital, to where they are on the site. Loading goes down here, Vesper along here, a landscaped area. The other entrance for Vesper right here. So you have a main entrance to the hospital, you have the emergency loading entrance, you have an entrance here on Vesper, and you have another entrance here on Vesper. That one's moving. So if we can go on to the next slide, if you can put that in, Tim, I'd like to actually go to the one that talks about the site. Here it is. One of the modifications that we worked on after we talked to folks about where things should be was, right now, in the site plans that you have, we show the exit and entrance right here for Vesper. One of the things that came about with that and looking at it, the laundromat. You back out of the laundromat, you're going to back right into where we're coming in and out. So the sense was, why don't we try to shift that down next to the hospital, also make it across from 10 Vesper, so that issues of headlights or anything else are going onto our own property, and a use that is, quite honestly, kind of a 9-to-5 type use. So to make it there, and also that creates the opportunity for some parallel spaces along Vesper more than what was in keeping before. So one of the things that we're going to, again, if you as board support this, well, we think this is a better layout and a better design design for the site plan. I get it. And on a net basis, it actually picks us up one parking space, keeps that parking field really intact. We don't think it's a cut-through issue in some ways. You know, everybody says, well, gee, cut through, and people trying to avoid the intersection. We actually think this makes it a little more circuitous to take you up and out. So we think this is a good realignment of the site plan. So that gives you a sense of what we're trying to do overall on the site plan. I'm going to turn it over very briefly to Steve Gowacki. Steve Gowacki is an engineer from R.J. O'Connell. Just touch very briefly grading and drainage and some of the other sort of technical things that are required for your findings associated with the hospital. Steve?
Thank you, John. Good evening. As John mentioned, I'm Steve Glowacki with R.J. O'Connell Associates. We're the civil engineers on the project. Touching briefly on grading and drainage, specifically the stormwater design was meant to or designed to comply with local and state requirements. And how we're going to do that is the stormwater management system has been designed to reduce peak flows and improve the water quality significantly through the use of best management practices. And those include catch basins with deep sumps and hoods, hydrodynamic particle separators, and subsurface infiltration. It's important to note there are no on-site wetlands, and of course we're outside the floodplain. Utilities, very briefly, we're providing a water loop around the building, which will provide domestic and fire services, and that'll be tied to South Prospect and Vesper. The sanitary system will be designed to connect to the sanitary system, the existing sanitary system, in Vesper Lane through existing manholes. There'll be a new electrical service that'll be provided subsurface. And there'll be several tanks which we've coordinated with the fire department, the location up by the emergency room at the northwest corner. Very briefly on the screening of the systems, the mechanical systems will be included up on the roof of the building, and they'll be screened from South Prospect and Vesper Lane by use of the sloped roof parapets. And you can see the views there. View A is, of course, from South Prospect Street, and you can't see the systems there, as well as from Vesper and View B. For access and egress, as John mentioned briefly, the access will be maintained through South Prospect Street and also from Vesper Lane. John already touched a bit upon the relocation of the driveway. It's also important to note that the emergency and loading operations for the hospital have been separated and segregated, if you will. The emergency access for the ER is located to the north, off of South Prospect, and that access road for service vehicles wraps around on the west side, and again down to the loading area in the southwest side. On South Prospect, we are providing an additional turn lane, a left turn lane, which will help reduce any type of queuing that may occur out on South Prospect. And as John also noted, we do have sufficient parking capacity, which is much more efficient, as you can see from the design. With that, I'm going to turn this over to John briefly to talk about the traffic.
We did do a traffic study and submitted it. We're not looking to generate actually new traffic. I mean, it's the folks who live on the island who are going to come to the hospital. But VAI did do a traffic report. And then related to that, you can see the site plan change we made. Also, I know there was an issue about Four Corners. It's really not part of our project, but the hospital did make the agreement with the town that we would fund the design and the information with respect to providing for a MassWorks grant application. There are many different alternatives, those far greater minds than ours, to decide how that's going to do, whether, a roundabout, realignment, intersection. It's really, again, not part of our project, but it is something that we are providing the funding and the plans for the town's consideration, so that they'll be able to file in August for a MassWorks grant for whatever is ultimately determined to be the preferred design on that. Steve? To
continue, the fire truck turning, what we did was coordinate with the with the fire department, they provided us with templates for their vehicles, and we used the largest vehicle, which is ladder 1, to illustrate that we can provide even flow and access for emergency vehicles from the north, from South Prospect, and also from the south for Vesper, both for the main hospital lots and also the emergency area. The building will be fully equipped with a sprinkler system as well, of course. Moving on to the helipad, as many may know, there's an existing helipad which is relatively close to Vesper. Operationally does not work great right now. The intent is to separate that out in the corner of the site and, more importantly, put that in closer proximity to the emergency room, which is a critical operation. It'll also, as I mentioned, provide some separation from other aspects of the hospital operation and the main hospital. As you can see, it's in a much more secure location, and what we're proposing is 2 actuated gates, which will be initiated when there is word that the helicopter is inbound. That will segregate the corner and again provide some separation. The flight paths are much more improved because they're moved away from Vesper, from the power lines and things like that in the street, and also from the residential neighborhoods. With that, I'm going to turn this over to Rich O'Connell, whose colleague will explain some landscaping.
Thanks, Steve. For the record, my name is Rich O'Connell. I'm with R.J. O'Connell and Associates, and Steve and I have been on the Nantucket Cottage Hospital team for a couple of years now, looking at many sites and now back to the main site. William Fleming Associates, WFA, did our landscape plan. Billy couldn't be here tonight, so I'm kind of pinch hitting for him. But this is the technical plan, which is in the package. It has all of the species and the requirements. There's a better plan, which shows it a little better. So anyway, along South Prospect Street, we have a very beefed up and prominent landscape area, and that is obviously for screening of the main hospital building behind, and we've done the same along Vesper. Again, this is to sort of screen the operations which are out there. The plant and tree species that have been chosen have been provided to be seasonal so that there's color all year round. It'll just keep changing with the seasons, which is rather straightforward these days. We have an improved pedestrian experience within the parking lot itself. There are sidewalks, crosswalks. We have 3 access points to the bikeway on South Prospect Street, and also carry those through the site so you can get down to Vesper as well. The landscaping has been dispersed throughout the parking lot, and again with some longitudinal islands to break up the parking. And the healing garden is in this area here between the emergency room and the main entrance. So that's a little walkway around. There's some benches and that type of thing. And the plant selection is consistent with the typical Nantucket design. Moving on to the lighting, there are basically 2 types of lighting. We have the short posts or the decorative posts. Those are only about 12 foot high. That's a Sternberg, manufactured by Sternberg. And then we have the parking lot lighting, which is manufactured by KIM, and that is a 21-foot height pole. That's these here. If we flip back to the landscape plan, so the pedestrian or the lower lights would be around the edges of the perimeter of the property, and then those taller ones would be really here in the main parking lot. That's where we would use those. At Gwen Village, as John said, this comes up a little later in the meeting, but we did want to talk about the preliminary subdivision plan just for a moment. So we're going to create a new access road down to the back of Vesper Lane, which will facilitate access to not only Nantucket Cottage Hospital property down there, but also UMass. We're going to do improvements to the Coast Guard property, some fencing and some landscaping. So the roadway is going to be 29 foot wide, in pavement width, 40 foot right away with a cul-de-sac at the end. We'll have new utilities, sewer, water, and drainage, and get them off of the the Coast Guard property, and I'll show you that in the next plan. We will be looking for waivers because of the width and a bicycle path, sidewalk on one side, and portions of the existing parking will be within the cul-de-sac. So I think the next slide. So currently, the access to both the UMass property and 16 Vesper is through the Coast Guard. The new subdivision will run along the property line here, provide proper frontage for UMass, proper frontage for Vesper, and again, we'll have the sidewalks along one side and a cul-de-sac. So these are a little more of the improvements that are going along for the Coast Guard property. There'll be fencing and landscaping. Again, we'll get rid of this this cut through here, and all of the utilities will come down along the new subdivision roadway. So how are we going to build this in 2 years? Well, we've been working with a construction manager that has about 55 phases. We think we've shortened this up to about 6 because we don't have the time to go through all of those, but most of his are building phases. So basically in phase 1, as John talked about, we're going to eliminate the 3 buildings on the back, eliminate move. Some of them get moved off site, some of them are being given away. And we're also going to close down the helipad, and that is going to go over to the airport for the duration of the project. So that's the first phase. We'll also have the Gwen Village improvements in place, or they'll be going on at that same time. So once we clear out the north and the west side, we are able to build, start building the new road, the construction access around the back, which will turn into be the permanent access and the helipad area. In the old helipad area, we'll be able to construct temporary parking, which will then allow us to move to the net, and we'll continue to use the front parking and the front entrance in the emergency room during this phase. Once we have the temporary parking and the construction access on the west and north side, we can come back and begin the improvements for the front side, and again, we keep the emergency room open through this area, but we'll begin the improvements here. Once those improvements are in place, we can flip back to the main entrance, using that as the main entrance. The emergency entrance is still open, and it clears up the entire west side to now build the building. Once the building is built, we'll have a temporary entrance down off of Vesper. We'll be utilizing the parking that we built in the earlier phase, and also the parking that was built in the earlier phase at the back, and we come in and demolish the existing hospital. And the final phase is finish out all the site improvements now that the hospital is gone. So we finish off the parking, the healing garden, all of the connections and utilities along the front, and of course the helipad. And that will be it. That's about 2 years.
We're in minute 21, so we'll be quick. We don't need to focus on the benefits of the new hospital, but we do think that as far as the site plan criteria, obviously subject to the board's input, we did try to focus on utility issues, stormwater, sewage, overall approach to landscaping, the site screening, to meet the objectives that are set forth on the site plan review. I know that was a quick sort of walk through the park. Ed Pesci has our presentation. We have been coordinating with him. We don't have comment letters back yet. He's looking at everything from the construction management plan to the utility issues. We have met with all the department heads on issues of water and sewer and the like, and we think our program is generally supported with everyone. So at that, we'll stop, and we have the folks here tonight and available to answer any questions or comments.
Great. Board members? Go.
I think I brought it up before. Just make sure that from the parking lot to Leprey's and Butterworth's building, because they're going to be parking in the old parking lot, I didn't notice a clear path of travel that was handicap accessible, because right now that building is elevated. So it's coming down to grade, but I didn't notice a way to get our handicap spaces over, and even if they're temporary, over in that corner. Once that building is moved, so the handicap spaces plus the path of travel to get in the door once it goes down to grade, I just didn't see that delineated?
A couple of things. One, both the Founders Building, which is elevated now, if you've been to that building, walk up the stairs, as well as the Anderson Building, they're both going to be brought down at grade. We have shown as part of the HDC filing the concrete walks and how that works at grade. But we want to relabel the ADA because although we technically have enough spaces, handicap accessible spaces, they're in the wrong place. They have to be more where, because if you think about it, they're going to go to the Anderson Building, we want to have some spaces there, we want to have a few more out front of the main hospital building, so we are in the process of relabeling some of our accessible spaces. No, it's a great comment, it's a right comment. We have to relabel those.
Some of those lights, the War of the World lights, that's all I can say. Those, I'm not so enthusiastic about it. I know it became an issue at this building. It became an issue at the Stop and Shop downtown, any of these large parking areas. I'm not terribly enthusiastic about modern alien lights as opposed to higher carriage lights like these Stop and Shop did. They put them up higher. So that's just a note on what I was looking at, some of the details. I'm going to be more interested. I'm going to leave it up to Pesci and your engineers to handle this drainage issue. Right now, there's no flooding in that parking lot, so it's in a good area for it. So, no clay. I'm going to be more interested in the screening and some of to soften the building because it's such a big building. I brought it up before on some of these other large projects. We brought it up at the Stop and Shop. I don't think it's possible, but just if you're using LEDs, there's a certain lumen, there's a certain color, there's a softer color than that bright blue, white color, which is causing some problems here. So I'd check what kind of color you're using and the power that you're using. In the parking lot, it's going to be much better organized. It's all going to be in one place instead of spread out 360 around the current building. I don't know, we've talked about a chip seal, we've talked about a color when we were doing the Stop and Shop parking lot, so it wasn't this big sea of black. I don't know if there's any alternative to completely blacktop as opposed to softening the color. We tried to do it at the Stop and Shop. It just didn't work out.
Yeah. Tim, could you put up the site plan, the parking and access, or the site plan, either one?
In the areas in front of the hospital, we are looking at a chip seal and some
pavers, right?
Concrete pavers, bituminous concrete, a whole bunch of different things are being looked at in this area here. But the main portion of the hospital parking lot would be bituminous, but then it would be broken up with these landscape walkways, the walkways to get from the main hospital over to the Anderson. So there's a bunch of different material types that are being used throughout that area for the walkways, the entrance, and the parking lot itself.
And on this lower piece where you have the visiting doctors, we didn't end up with a door on the Vesper Lane side, but we end up with a door temporarily anyway on this end, on the long end?
We do have a temporary entrance there.
Are you going to leave
during
that
one of the
entrance
phases
there so that people coming down Vesper can just walk in that door, or is it going to go away and we're going to have to go all the way around the corner? We've brought this up a couple of times in the past.
The ambulatory entrance? I don't know what that means.
John Jennings from Kinna Design.
Yep. So that is the ambulatory wing.
Yep.
And we have an entrance that would be used seasonally, so during the high season for urgent care.
Good. Fine. That's a compromise. Otherwise, I think you've done a tremendous amount of work on this. You've done a tremendous job on this, especially trying to keep the existing hospital functioning while this is going on for 2 years, which is a feat in itself. So I don't have too many other comments about this. I think it's done very well for itself. I've seen the design multiple times, and I think it's working itself out beautifully.
Thank you.
Go ahead.
Over here, little subdivision road there, how they got, is that,
That's there now.
I know it's there now, but they're gonna continue to get their access through the parking lot, is that?
We are. I mean, that's all of those buildings, with the exception of one, are owned by the hospital.
That's all
And
hospital staff.
that's where people pull in now. One of the reasons we left this area here was, again, to provide effectively some screening to the parking area and to the hospital. Again, it breaks down the massing, and that's one of the reasons we left it there. But all that exists today.
Yeah, no, I know.
Anyone else?
Mr. Chairman?
Yeah, go ahead.
Just a couple of general questions regarding alternative energy. I met with my friend Jason a few weeks ago as a private citizen just to get some information on the hospital. Is there any room in the roof area with the HVC units for solar PV or solar thermal, or on the roof of the Anderson building or the Founders building? Have you considered that in your design process?
I think, and John, if you want to speak to that, we have considered some alternative energy opportunities, and I can't say that any of them came out to be supported based on sort of cost and benefit, but John, if you want to speak to it.
There are several things that we're looking at in the building. That we're targeting LEED Gold as a general statement. But within that, we are looking at opportunities. We're talking to the utility companies, looking for opportunities where we could, for instance, put PV on the roof and that kind of thing. It would all be hidden behind that sloped roof, but angled to get the maximum distribution. Those are all on the table. I don't know that we have anything pinned down yet, but we're looking at those as alternatives.
Thank you.
Anyone else on the board? I do have a few questions for you. You said you're going to relocate the driveway that's here on Vesper right now. Did I hear that correctly? So
Right here. Tim, why don't you put up, if you wouldn't mind that?
That's okay. I just want to make sure I heard that.
Absolutely. We're going to shift it from here because the thought is cars pulling out and people backing out of the laundromat.
All right, good. Because it brings me to a few things that I just want to bring up really quickly. Things like propane, gases that you use like oxygen, those types of things. Is all that back delivery on the back end of the property?
Yeah, we're trying to put effectively you get all of this service areas down and through here.
Yeah, no, I'm glad to see you doing that at this point, just to take it off any other access areas that you're looking at. Something, and I don't want to get into it tonight, but something I do want to have a chat with you guys about is the Founders building and the location that you're using right now. It's just it being across the street, moving back and forth with pedestrian traffic and stuff. I want to save that conversation because I'd like to understand it a bit further, how it integrates into the rest of the site, what your view is of a campus, and maybe there might be an opportunity to discuss moving that over into the main campus and losing a few parking spaces. I know. Okay.
Ooh, that hurts.
God forbid.
Yeah.
Okay. This is why I said I don't want to have this conversation. Specifically, I do not want to have this conversation tonight.
Okay. We won't have it, but intensity of the Vesper building, I think we can convince you why this works.
And that's why I want to sit down and talk with you afterwards.
Okay, that's fair.
No. I understand that. It's just developing a campus for you at this point.
Mm-hmm.
And like I said, I'll plead my ignorance at the moment.
It's a good point. We thought about it. Let's get, all right, we'll follow up on it.
I'd just like to have the discussion. So
sure.
I, as one board member, I understand about it. One thing I do want to bring up for the record at this point is I did have the opportunity to meet with your crew prior to this, which I really appreciated as one member of the board. It was very enlightening to sit down with you on kind of a one-to-one basis and begin to understand that. So just so I've made that clear for the record, to divulge that to the rest of the members out there, and also say I really appreciate what you've done with this.
We appreciate the input. That's why this plan, I think, has advanced to the point that it has today.
Yeah, great.
I really do.
Thank you. Andrew, did you have something?
Just a few small things. And basically, the hospital has been great working. We've had many meetings going over, kind of the puzzle pieces, fitting it all together. One thing that we did talk about, I think we should maybe look at, is the on-street parking along the street there. Right. Maybe continuing that. I mean, there is a huge demand for that when there's events at the high school. And I think that, we may want to transition that sidewalk beyond the entrance and at least, there's at least shoulder parking there, which is used quite a bit. Again, I think anybody knows this at town meeting or school events. There's parking all along that road right now, and we don't really want to lose that. Okay.
And we did, by redoing this alignment, actually picked up
Right.
about 6 spaces. So
Right.
that's on total.
I think that other section we need to look at beyond the entrance, that maybe there needs to be
Oh, okay.
a little bit more.
Okay. I mean, back in through, you want to look back through here?
Because that will be, that is utilized now
Okay.
during peak times. I also, and this isn't going to be a surprise to you, the green light situation, I don't understand why that isn't part of our site plan. I think it should be. There were years of conversation about that building being in the way of that sidewalk. It is in the way now. It creates a safety hazard at that. And again, you have contractors coming, moving buildings all over the place, and that building needs to be moved. That was expressed before the level of improvements were there, and I certainly don't want to hold your big project up, but there was an easement granted in advance, and years of discussion were about moving that building out of the way.
We understand.
And I think the opportunity is to include it in the site plan now. When it gets done, we can certainly talk about, but if other buildings are being moved, it seems like that's the opportune time to have that done. So.
And I have to concur with Mr. Vorse at this point, because as one board member, and I think I made this abundantly clear to you, certainly pedestrian flow, sidewalk, bicycle path, this is a big project that's going to affect an area that we see as being an incredibly busy area as well, too. And I appreciate you working with us to try to get that four-way intersection addressed, because we need to do that. That absolutely has to be done with the way you're developing this site. But I agree with Andrew where you're now going to be moving buildings around. So certain things like the green light and stuff does have to come back up because it's still under your control.
It is.
So as one member of the board, I have to support him for bringing that up. And I think we need some further dialogue on making some of those things work well for us.
We added a note on the green light building that we do want to coordinate on the easements, but we absolutely recognize the issue. We actually revised the site plans to put the note on there. Same thing also that Mr. Vorse had raised the issue over on, I forgot to mention, 10 Vesper to be sure that there's a drive there. If the Coast Guard will approve it, we'll actually lumen seed that. We did add that note on the plan. And we did add a note about, and I didn't mention it, a couple of dedicated cemetery spots along the parallel parking along here, because that was an issue that the Cemetery Commission had brought up. So I did neglect to reference those 3 notes that we added to the plan.
Right.
And
go ahead.
And that's all absolutely true. But while we're doing our site plan review, I don't see why we would not include that property as part of the overall site plan review. It's part of the campus. It's a critical part. Even to make that intersection, the widening of the road is a great addition to deal with the traffic there. But again, we have that house so close to the sidewalk, it's impeding on the visibility and the access there. I believe it should be part of the site plan review now.
So you would want to see that building adjustment be part of the site plan filing?
I do.
Okay.
And I think it should be included in the overall approval from the planning board. The scheduling of that is something certainly
We would like to work with you on that
We can
scheduling.
have a further in my opinion, we can be flexible on that somewhat, but I think it needs to be part of our review.
Understood.
Anything else from?
I just ask a couple questions, Barry.
Yeah. All right, it's okay. Go ahead. Yeah.
John, thank you for everything you've done, and everybody else involved. This is unbelievable. We're a long way from the first night in this room. No basement, huh?
No basement, huh? No. Couldn't afford it.
Dirt's Dirt's worth a lot when you dig
you
a
know,
dig a hole
I-
in Nantucket.
In Nantucket, I would argue basement is the cheapest space that you can ultimately have. And I agree with that,
That
but
is going to be the
two issues. Public licensure and what you can actually program if you own a hospital in that space is very limited. And two, the raw cost of doing it, given where we're at in our fundraising and what we can afford. And there were those of us
Yeah, I
who
understand that.
fought for it and lost.
Where are you putting the boilers? You have a room for everything?
I don't know if you wanna-
Utility room on the first
Yeah,
ground floor.
Yeah, John Jennings, if you want to speak to the...
Be a lot of...
It's all going to be actually back in this region? I don't know if Josh, you want to-
You know, all those PVC vents are through the roof.
Yep, there's a...
It'd be a cloud like no one's ever seen.
Generally back in this area, there's a room that will have the boilers. The air handlers will be up on the roof. A lot of that is for with hurricanes and things like that, so you don't get them all flooded out.
Well, okay. What about, you're not doing cryogenic storage, right?
No.
Good. Don't do it. Won't work here. Okay.
Never say never.
I just want to make sure they're not making a mistake. That's good.
Holly, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm Holly Backus, the land use specialist for the town, and I just had a curious question about the gates and the helipad. Is there a planning on how that works when there's deliveries that are coming through? Because we can get the helicopter here at any time of the day, so I didn't know if that was planned about.
Yeah, I don't know if Steve, if you want to speak to it.
We're currently working with an FAA consultant, and at that point, we're going to start working directly with the MedFlight people. So part of the thought is that our protocol will be worked into the program so that when there are incoming flights, they can be coordinated with deliveries. The actuated gates on both sides at the northwest corner will prevent obviously service vehicles from moving through, but you will be able to gain access from the Vesper or from South Prospect. So even in the event that you have incoming ambulances, they'll still be able to access the building from one side or the other and not impact the helipad landing zone. And that'll be the same with the service, specifically the delivery of fuels. You want to very much coordinate that with any potential landing. So if it means that there's a delay in that delivery in favor of an incoming helicopter movement, that's obviously the more critical path.
Thank you.
Anyone else on the board? There'll be other opportunities too, so we've got a little ways to go with this one. All right, so ladies and gentlemen, let me open the public hearing at this phase. I know a lot of you are here for this. The only thing I'm going to ask you to do, besides identifying yourself for the record, is if you agree with your neighbor in totality, just say, I agree with whoever had that last comment at this point. I just, in terms of keeping things a little bit on the brief side. But we really do welcome your comments, and if anyone's interested in speaking, just raise your hand and I will acknowledge you. That's okay. That's fair game right now. Yeah, one gets that sense. One does get that sense pretty quickly at this point. Really, thank you. I do really appreciate that. So,
Well, I'll make a motion to continue to.
Sure. Yeah, go ahead.
Well, then jump up, Dawn. Jump up.
You're not. That's okay. I know this is
Just that Dawn Holgate, 4 and 8 Vesper Lane, that we're very supportive of the secondary access move. That's really important to our business. And we would support the idea of more on-street parking. It's really heavily used, a lot by the school. And just wanted to also make sure that that sidewalk on the hospital side of the street is going to connect up to the sidewalk on Surfside Road. It's just not showing there. So those were my only comments. I think that the plan's pretty great.
It does. Joan, just one thing really quickly. I just noticed on your site plans where the laundry is, it was kept being referred to as a residential property. I don't know why. But just do me a favor and take a look at it. Because
Okay.
every time I looked at it, it kept throwing me off. It's like, I know what's there.
Gee, we all know it's a laundromat.
Yeah, we all know it's
Yeah, okay.
I was just a little surprised by
There is a residence next door, but it wasn't, the laundromat wasn't labeled as a...
It was definitely labeled. Just take a look. I can show you where it is later. I don't want to belabor the point. Really.
Okay.
Is there anything or anyone else who wants to comment at this point?
I'll make a motion to continue to June 13th.
Beautiful. And do I hear a second? Discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor, please say aye.
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 John, you can get together with Ed, because it's kind of critical that we get Ed Pesci before the 13th so we can just get this done.
Yeah, our goal is to get his comment letter and answer all his questions before the 13th if we can. And thank you, by the way, for the time, and thank you for letting us
No
late
problem.
in the
Thank
evening.
you very much.
Appreciate it.
Really do appreciate it. Next thing before us is 26-16.
Thanks, everybody, for coming.
Yes, thank you.
Been a long night for all of you. I'm sure it's been fascinating.
Let's move along, though. Next thing before us is 26-16, which is South Valley Industrial MCD, which is 8B Gregland Ave for the applicant. You're recusing. Hi there.
Hi. Good evening, everybody. Well, I'm here for a special permit to move on a 13 Gregland to AV.
Hold on just one second. Ladies and gentlemen, if you could please take yourself outside because we've got some other business to conduct. I'd greatly appreciate it. Thank you. And I'm sorry, your name for the record, sir?
My name is Francisco Merlos.
Okay, great.
And I'm here to special permit to move on a 13 Gregland Ave to AV Gregland, which is the footings are being done already. And so please, I'm begging you guys to get this approved. And if it doesn't get approved, I mean, this house is gonna be a loss for me. And and about screening, I know it's been a big fight, I think, with Richmond. And if the screening is a big issue, I'm a landscaper. This is what I do for a living. I can provide Leland cypress, which I have no problem to buy them and plant them. I mean, I can plant them like 10 feet high.
Let me help him a little bit here. Andrew, you can probably chime in also. There's an existing MCD. It came through because there's a house move, and he's got a limited time to move the house because it's coming up on where they can't move it anymore, and the house has already been given a demo permit or a move permit by the HDC. He wants to move the dwelling onto the front of the lot. I believe the setback is 30 feet under the MCD. He wants to move it to, and the concern from Patty, because Andrew and I talked to her, was that they were setting the footings inside the 30 feet without coming back to modify the MCD to allow it to go inside the 30 feet. Not that there was a tremendous amount of trouble with it going to 18 feet as a residence. It's blocking the commercial use in the rear. So you want to keep going? Because he's going to have a hard time explaining it.
Right, and I did speak to this gentleman at the office. Unfortunately, I wasn't here. I would have given you my opinion then that it should have been granted at the last meeting. The reason for that 30-foot separation was because that side of the street which had residences at the time, might have been seen spillover of the commercial. But the fact that a residence is going to face other residences really, and again, the effectiveness of that, if you look at your site plan,
Can only get better.
isn't really so good. So the point is this should have, I believe this should have been granted anyway. The reason for that was to prevent, it's a mixed-use commercial district anyway, and having this residence in the front and commercial in the back is completely consistent with what we've talked about. So I think that this should be granted.
It's an appropriate structure coming in.
And again, you're having residential uses facing other residential uses across the street. The reason for the 30-foot buffer at the time was to prevent the mess that you see very clearly in the aerial from impacting that particular side of the street, and that's not the case now. So I recommend approval.
Yeah. Board members, any comment? Okay. Ladies and gentlemen, this is a public hearing. If anyone would like to comment on it. Yeah, I'm going to actually wind up activating Mr. Borchard in the end.
I think he's the only game in town right
yes,
now.
Yes, he is.
We can activate this person here. Why don't we?
I'll make a motion to close the public hearing.
Do I hear a second?
Why are we doing it?
Motion is made and second to close the public hearing. All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Those opposed?
Motion to approve.
Second.
Discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Ayes have unanimously. Thank you.
Say.
All right.
Can we just, these are be signed in the office, but can we get this one done quickly? Because you've got a move permit already?
I just have a little issues with, I think Verizon has.
Okay, because I know he had
Just
an
trying.
ability to move it to 30 feet.
Yeah.
But now you got the ability to move it to the, keep going with the foundation.
Okay,
Keep
great.
going, because you already
Okay.
got that permit too.
Great, thank you.
Great.
Thank you. Okay, so do you know, like, how long it will take? So we'll
Quickly.
quick. Okay, great. Thank you.
All right.
Thank you very much.
Right.
We all set?
Yeah, this is right, Mr. Chairman. Just for clarity, this is a modification to that prior MCD, which should be
Right.
very, very brief, and it shouldn't impact that earlier building permit at all.
Okay.
Cool.
So,
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay. Oh,
All
you
right,
guys are
so
still
you
here.
have a preliminary plan for Gwen Village, which I think we've already had some insight into, but why don't you just, since this gets taped and goes on the television, once again for the record, if you would.
For the record, Mr. Chairman, thank you. John Tuig, representing Nantucket Cottage Hospital, here with Rich O'Connell and Steve Gawacki. This is on a preliminary subdivision plan. I think, as many of you know, immediately across the street from the hospital is located the Coast Guard facility. Behind that is UMass, and then behind that, Nantucket Cottage Hospital. When we started the rezoning process associated with the hospital, the Coast Guard has expressed some concern. As you might imagine, as a federal agency, they want to have their own sort of fiefdom and don't like the fact that, and this is related to when it was a naval base, that both the hospital and UMass have a right to go through the parking lot. And they have children there, and they have swing sets and the like, so the request was, could we explore a separate and distinct preliminary subdivision plan that would give frontage to the hospital land, to UMass, but more importantly, would be a sort of a straight shot down into the hospital land. But we would agree, as would UMass, and if you look at right behind you, the preliminary subdivision plan, the grayed out area is the easement that exists today, and you can see where we cut a snake right through there. We would eliminate, and both UMass and the hospital would relinquish their rights so that then the Coast Guard is its own parcel, and we have agreed to fence their entire area and landscape it as part of our early action. And then, as you see on the left-hand side of that plan, a 44-foot right-of-way would then come down along the edge of the property. And the arrangement with the Coast Guard and the federal government is UMass and the hospital will relinquish their rights in the easement in exchange for the rights to that roadway, and as Rich had described it, a teardrop cul-de-sac. And we think it makes perfect sense. One thing we didn't talk about, but is the expectation during construction that we'll have some parking activities in that rear lot, because we're going to have to put employees somewhere, because during, as we're building on the site and developing the site, so we think that makes a lot of sense to do that subdivision. So we wanted to get your guidance. There were certain waivers that were requested. Would have sidewalks only on one side. We wouldn't have the bike path going through there. So that, in essence, is we're looking for your guidance on seeing if we could move forward on that subdivision plan.
You'd have a sidewalk, though, right?
We do have a sidewalk,
'Cause
absolutely.
if people are going to be using it back there, if MVHS is still back there, they're going to need a sidewalk.
Absolutely. And the thought is, we want, as I said, we want to do that as an early action item so people will be able to walk down there. And the problem that we have now, people from the hospital, UMass, and others, they park along that easement area, and that just drives the Coast Guard people crazy. It just does. And, since 9/11, having met and spent some time with the Coast Guard, they've said, we want our property to be totally secure, and you people keep it from being secure. So please go away, was pretty much what they said. So that's, we convinced the hospital to fund. It's about a $400,000 improvement, to give you a sense. But it really is the right thing to do. So that was how we're going to move forward.
So, board members, do you have any feedback for them at this point with it being preliminary plan?
I have one question.
Yes, sir.
29 feet for the traveled way on the interior?
Correct.
Is that allowing for parking on one side?
Yes, it is.
Okay, that's
Yeah.
fine.
Good.
I just... And how will it be? Will that be marked, or will that just be... What's the idea for that?
It is shown as being marked, so the driveway, when it hits Vesper, is down to the 24 feet, and then it's 29 with a bump in for the parking.
So will the pavement be marked, or will it just be sort of...
It's shown as being striped. We're going to stripe it.
Okay.
And through you, Andrew, I know both you and Leslie have maybe spent a little bit more time with this. Are you satisfied with the way Vesper Lane shaped up in terms of the bike path and the sidewalk through there?
Yes.
Because that's just another important issue. Okay.
Yep.
Good. So, board members, hopefully you've gotten the feedback from us.
No, that's great.
Yeah, it's a preliminary plan, so you would...
I do have... I'm sorry. I have one more question on... Because this abuts property that may be... Is this going to become a public road, or is the idea that this would stay private?
The thought was it would say private for now, and that's our sense of it.
Okay. Generally, where a road abuts other land that has development potential, which this does, and I think we've lived through
You're right.
side-by-side roads where people say, oh, no, you can't use the road. I think that is something that we're going to want some sort of easement for the abutting property owner, for that to be available under certain conditions.
Your point is pretty well taken here. Yeah.
Well, again, there needs to be a process that allows that, because, I think there's at least 3 that I can think of where we've had to run side-by-side 40-foot roads if there's development potential.
Right.
And it's something that it has to be built into the process.
I'd ask you to think about it. I'm not sure I can deliver that because of the rules with the federal government. It has been extraordinarily, there's a very, very narrow band in which we can get this conveyance.
Gotcha.
And if I were to grant other rights, I'm virtually positive I can't get the conveyance from the federal government.
Well, the federal government won't be using this road, will they?
No, but I mean, everything, for example, we have to deliver to them the hazardous waste study for their own land. We have to deliver the title to them. Okay. How they value this in the appraisal process, if we created another easement right, they'll change how they value the land, and then therefore the swap between the easement, I mean, I'm getting a little esoteric, but the swap then between the easement and the roadway will change.
Then, Mr. Chairman, there may be some way to set it up that in the event it becomes a public road. I mean,
I'm sure there's something we can do to do that.
We need to think about.
No, you're right. The concurrent roadways don't tend to work well.
The planning issues around the roads are important. They should be the most important, and it's in your rules and regulations about where roads abut property.
I'd rather explore it in some type of an agreement post-acquisition, so we don't have a valuation issue with the Coast Guard. Otherwise, I can tell you that they'll value the road swap different.
I think
differently?
that's
So
possible.
That's all. So,
Let's just think about it.
okay. No, it's a fair point. I mean, the concurrent road issue is real. I mean,
I'll
that's,
make a motion to authorize the chair to sign a letter in support of the preliminary plan.
Good. Do I hear a second to that?
Second.
Discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Those
Thank you very
opposed?
much.
Thanks.
We have a plan, Barry, that we have to sign before we leave tonight. One
Yep.
plan.
So, ZBA, Surfside Commons Comprehensive Permit application. I know Andrew and Eleanor have been diligent about sending things out.
Yeah, we should,
Good.
the decision isn't due until September.
Oh, it isn't?
So we need some more time to
Yeah.
put together a draft for you, and we'd ask you to continue this, or move
That-
this over.
I don't think anyone's going to disagree with you at this point. Okay. And that brings us to election of officers.
A motion, Barry, to be chair still, one more time.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay, thank you. And vice chair?
I'll make a motion for Linda to continue as vice chair.
Okay. Discussion? Why am I saying discussion? I'm sorry. Oh, it's been a long day. I'm sorry. I'm reverting back to square one here.
Clock went
All those in
around
favor,
once.
please say aye.
Aye.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone.
To adjourn.
I think that's a capital idea.
All those in favor?
Aye.
And
Yeah. Thank you all.
we have a plan that has to be signed, guys. Don't get up. Where is it? Where's Dawn's?